morning! It's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've had a bit of a crisis of confidence. I hope you don't mind me confiding in you this morning. But we've obviously spent the last 6 or 7 years being completely right about everything from Brexit to Boris Johnson to Jacob Rees-Mogg to Jeremy Corbyn to Nadine Dorries to 30p Lee. All of these chickens have come home to roost. But I think we've made a fairly grave error throughout all of that period. I think that the question of, and it really came into focus for me during COVID, or rather I think we were at our worst during COVID, and when we would spend hours some weeks wrestling with the question of whether or not there was some sort of sinister master plan. You know, we discovered subsequently the whiteboard with "let the bodies pile high" on it, and the sort of almost quasi-eugenicist approach that was reportedly contemplated in Downing Street. And then that curious moment on morning television when Johnson talked about letting it run through the population, and there was an almost sort of Kremlin-esque conspiracy subsequently to pretend that he hadn't said that at all. And then you had that suspension of normal standards because you felt in a time of national emergency you have little choice but to put your faith in the government, even if it's a government led by Johnson and Cummings. Good grief. And we spent a lot of time during that period wondering whether there was some sort of sinister master plan. And I look back now, and I think we gave them far too much credit. It was probably Dominic Cummings' fault because he sort of cultivated this image as a super brain, as some sort of wonk. And yet, really, he, as a proper study of Vote Leave's antics during Brexit shows, really, he was just another nativist provocateur. But he thinks he's Albert Einstein. And that perhaps is why we fell into the trap of thinking there was some sort of master plan. And we tried to work. We spent hours. I mean, to be honest with you, I was so grateful for your company during that period that it didn't really matter what we talked about, especially when I was doing the show from my shed. That was a curious little period of professionalism. Really strange. I almost can't quite believe that it happened. We may talk about working from home later in the programme as well. I said to you last week, some numbers came out, I don't know if you remember, looking at the hit that commercial landlords had taken. And I said to you, going to be a couple more stories next week about working from home. And lo and behold, someone's discovered that the company Zoom also has people in offices as well as at home, which I don't quite understand why that's supposed to be a story. It's a bit like pretending that, well, do you know what? Some of those delivery drivers actually use shops. Can you believe it? Deliveroo drivers sometimes go into shops. Or Ocado deliveries actually use... But anyway, I said to you that the interests of the commercial landlords were so considerable and they wielded so much influence over so much of the media that news about the scale of the hit that they were still taking from the abandonment of office space would no doubt lead to another round of attacks on the very principle of working from home. And lo and behold, it has. But that's just me remembering how weird it was to work from home during that little period. And the fact that we talked, not endlessly, I hope it never feels like we're talking about anything endlessly, but we talked constantly about whether or not there was a master plan. And I'm looking at I still don't quite understand. I won't be asking this question today, but that doesn't mean you can't answer it. I still don't quite understand why the fate of 15 asylum seekers has dominated the news in such a way. And I wonder whether 30p Lee's foul-mouthed intervention is actually designed to distract us from the facts of the matter, from the issue. Because here's the bit, and this is the foothills of the mountain that we're going to try and climb together today. Because if I want you to think about a battle, okay? And if you're on the same side as Rishi Sunak and 30p Lee and honest Bob Jenrick and Alex Chalk and Suella Braverman, and I understand why you might be, I really do. I don't know that I respect your position much, but I certainly understand it. So here is the hillock. here is the hillock. In fact, in the case of 30p Lee, we could call it the pillock hillock. So here is the hillock into which they are going to stick their standard. They're going to stick their flag. And the plan, I think, is to get as many people as possible foaming at the mouth and shouting at the other lot. But what is the actual battlefield? I know who the other lot is. The other lot is people who say, well, look, we've got to process these applications. We've got to be honest about what international law actually says. We've got to call out lies from all of them now about 4-star hotels and safe countries. And the more people believe these lies, the more important it is to call them out, even if you're the only one, even if you're a lonely voice. It feels a bit like Brexit, doesn't it? But slowly, if you are dedicated to reality and honesty and truth, slowly the rest of the world has to come around to your way of looking at things. George Orwell put it best. There is truth. There is only truth. If you can hold on to that, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad. So they're all lying about it, right up to the top of the government now. Mr. Professionalism, Accountability and Integrity himself. They're all lying about it. And you can't quite work out what they think the battlefield is. Because people on the other side are simply saying, listen, we must process these applications. If people are here under false pretenses, then we must cooperate internationally to remove people to wherever they should be. The problem is you can't actually remove people to war zones or to places where they might get tortured, which puts you in a bit of a pickle. Because the only people who you might want to remove to war zones or places where they might actually get tortured would be genuine asylum seekers. So this conflation, this hideous conflation of economic migrant with asylum seeker must be deliberate, and they must know what they're doing. 30p Lee probably doesn't. I want to be clear, to be fair to the man. He probably doesn't understand what's going on at all. He just comes out with these sort of inarticulate grunts and these foul-mouthed belches, and all of the posh people in his own party who look down on him in the most violent and unpleasant fashion, pat him on the head and pretend that he somehow represents the working class. It's a sort of Faragist approach to racism, pretending, if you like, that it's a working class feature, when most of the most virulent racists I've come across in my personal life went to schools like mine and sound a bit like Jacob Rees-Mogg. I suppose that's another legacy of empire. So you've got one group of people on the pillock hillock. You've got one group of people calling upon you to come and dance to their tune, to take up arms on their behalf. And then on the other hill, you've got people saying, look, we just need to have a system that works. We just need to process. Look, even if the barge itself is definitely and demonstrably safe and humane, I don't personally like the idea of turning asylum into a punishment, but I can conceive of a waterborne vehicle, a waterborne vessel that isn't controversial. I just don't think that it's this one. It seems to have been chosen to be controversial. I don't know that that's even an opinion. I think that's a simple matter of counting. So I know what the two sides are, roughly, but I don't know what the battlefield is here, because the people claiming, or the people making great capital out of the problem, out of promising to fix the problem, the people deploying what we could probably all agree is a form of performative cruelty to depict themselves as fixing the problem. And listen, performative cruelty is not controversial. Again, we divide into two groups. We divide into two camps, which is their intention. People who love the cruelty and people who don't love it. That's all. You know, there's a huge spectrum of people on both sides. People who are mildly uncomfortable with the cruelty are on the same team as people who think it's absolutely abhorrent. People who sort of look towards Amnesty International for guidance on matters like this. And then on the other side, on the other hillock, you've got people who love it. The nastier it is, the better. So when you can say in public they should F off back to France, people love it. They love it. Yeah, I love the way, not just what you're saying, I love the way you're talking about them, as if they're scum. I love that. 30p Lee. That they're all on that hill. But what's the actual battlefield? Because they created the problem. And honest Bob Jenrick said something on Sky News this morning that I feel is really important. And again, just sort of deploying you once again as my unpaid therapist, you've got to keep doing this, even if you are the only one. You've got to keep pointing out. So yesterday, Alex Chalk talking about 4-star hotels. Nobody. I mean, how many people interviewed Alex Chalk yesterday? Nobody picked him up on it. Nobody said, could you give me one example of an asylum seeker receiving the same 4-star treatment that a paying guest in a 4-star hotel would receive? Because if you can, I will, in the immortal words of Jim Bowen, I'll get Les Dennis even, I'll give you the money myself. And I think Robert Jenrick's been at it today, Honest Bob Jenrick today, saying they demand to be put up in 4-star hotels. Find me an asylum seeker enjoying, on 50 quid a week, 4-star hotel accommodation comparable to what a paying customer would get in a 4-star hotel. And I will, in the immortal words of Les Dennis, I will give you the money myself. So what's the battlefield? Listen to this from Honest Bob on Sky News earlier, but listen quite carefully, because if you have created a problem, it is surely your responsibility.
If you are making such progress, why is the backlog so huge? Why does it take 1 to 3 years to process somebody here in the UK and it takes 6 months in Germany? That's the nub of the problem, isn't it?
It isn't the nub of the problem, but it is an important thing that we have to get right. I say that because there are those, such as the Labour Party, and you heard from Yvette Cooper earlier, saying that just if you process claims quickly, that will fix it. I think that's a naive view. That's what they did when they were last in office, and that just encourages more people to come. But it is right that we make the Home Office as efficient as possible, and the good news is that we're succeeding. We've increased the number of decision makers to 1,800, and we're on course by the 1st of September to increase that to 2,500. That will be almost doubling the size of the organisation. Productivity is rising, and the last 8 weeks of data show record levels of decision making. So I'm very confident that we will make good on the promise that we made in December to clear the legacy backlog by the end of the year, and to put the whole system on a more sustainable footing. But as I say, that is important, but it's not sufficient. You have to abut that good work with a proper strategy to stop people coming in the first place. That's where the Labour Party falls short, because they just don't have that plan, and I'm not sure they even want to stop the boats in that regard. That's why the Rwanda policy matters. That's why making the UK a less attractive destination matters, such as by putting people in rudimentary and decent accommodation, but not luxurious forms of accommodation.
OK, so, I mean, count the lies. Show me an asylum seeker in a luxurious form of accommodation, for example. We've contacted various departments. We're still waiting to hear back from Alex Chalk's people on what the hell he was talking about yesterday with regard to 4-star hotels. Have we put a call into Jenrick's people today? I think we've put a call into Jenrick's people as well. They won't get back to us. They won't respond to it. They won't, because they can't, because they know they're lying. And that's part of the point. That's part of the plan. But Jenrick there essentially saying we can't process the applications because that will encourage people to come. Remember, our law is perfectly adequate in this space. If you are a genuine refugee or a genuine asylum seeker, you can stay. If you're not, you can't. So that's what processing applications do. The reluctance to process them seems to me to be predicated by the knowledge that the massive majority of people coming here are genuine asylum seekers. Otherwise, if they're all fake and bogus, process them as quickly as flipping possible and employ the full extent of the law to remove, if this is your desire and your policy, to remove the people that are not fleeing war or oppression or torture or persecution. So why wouldn't they process the applications? Why have they let the numbers grow to, I think, 136,000? Why have they presided for 13 years over a system that now takes, in many cases, 5 times longer than it does in Germany to process an application? Why do they want the backlog to be so huge while simultaneously claiming that they're working every hour God sends to shrink it? They're fighting tooth and nail to shrink it. So what's the plan? And I bring you back to the battlefield. So today's conversations are about one idiot using the F word, despite holding what used to be a respected and respectable office within the Conservative Party. The party of Winston Churchill now has a deputy chairman who runs around the place effing and jeffing for the entertainment, like a sort of performing chimp for the entertainment of right-wing media. That's part of the conversation. And the other part is 15 fellas on a barge in Portsmouth Harbour, 15 people. That's the battlefield at the moment. That can't be sustained until the next general election. That can't be sustained until the end of next year. can it? It just can't. So what's the plan? What I mean, and the reason I opened up with that slightly round the houses admission of having made terrible mistakes sometimes when I thought there must be a sinister master plan that's too complex for the likes of you and me to be able to understand and discern, like 3D chess. We used to use that phrase, like they're playing 3D chess and I can't see what it is. I mean, it looks really stupid. The idea, unless we're about to embark upon the single ugliest period of British political history, something that would make Brexit look like a walk in the park, something that would make Nigel Farage look like Mother Teresa, unless they're going to try to inflate this problem entirely of their own creation into effectively a form of race warfare, then I just don't know what the plan is. 0345 6060 973. It's Schrodinger's policy. Robert Jenner this morning admitted that the Tory party policy is somehow to simultaneously let the waiting list for asylum processing become enormous while boasting about how important it is to shrink it. And the problem in the logic of saying they're trying to have their cake and eat it is that the justification for letting it become enormous is to stop people, including genuine refugees, bona fide refugees and asylum seekers, from coming here. It's 20 minutes after 10. Have a think. I need your help. I've done a long introduction today, which often means I've run out of steam and indeed words. But what is the plan? What's the plan in the context of next year's general election? What is this about? Where do they hope that it is going to lead? Because once you stop talking about 30p Lee and his latest inarticulate belch, what are you going to be talking about? Once there's 500 fellas on this barge, what are they going to be talking about? 136,000 people waiting to have their applications processed. And the statistics suggest that 80, 90, maybe more % of them will be accepted. What's the plan? Where are they hoping to take us with this rhetoric and this so-called culture war? Genuine question. All answers welcome. 0345 6060 97. Oh, hang on, because I've got one more thought. Imagine if it worked. Imagine if nobody came here seeking asylum. I'm now going to tell you exactly what the Conservative Party would be able to campaign on at the next election if they somehow managed to solve what they choose to describe as the refugee crisis. Are you ready for this? Get your pens and paper. Here it comes. This is what they'd be campaigning on. This is the platform they would have if they didn't have provocations, embellishments, lies and foul-mouthed Neanderthals talking about refugees and asylum seekers. This is it. This is the list. It is 10:24, and it is a really strange flex. I guess pointing out that they've got absolutely nothing to campaign. I think 30p Lee let that cat out of the bag, didn't he, as well, accidentally, trying to desperately weaponise transgender conversations and fight culture wars because Jeremy Corbyn's not there anymore. The main reason why people offered up for changing their vote from Labour to Tory in 2019. Brexit is not a campaign issue. When Keir Starmer's going to wake up to this, goodness only knows. But the notion that you can campaign next year promising to get Brexit done has gone out the window. So what on earth are they going to campaign on? And how does it work? How can you campaign on a promise to fix a problem that is entirely of your own creation? So what is the plan? 0345 6060 973. And maybe there just isn't one. Maybe it is just let's get through a week. Let's try and keep some people on side. Let's appeal to the I don't know who you're appealing to, the kind of people who but let's just be kind and say the kind of people who believe lies about refugees. Now, the propensity to believe lies about refugees is perhaps grounds for making nastier accusations or using saltier language. But in the first instance, people who believe lies about refugees, are there enough of them potentially in the UK to make a change to the electoral calculus for the Conservatives? I don't know. Usually I've got a strong opinion on stuff like this. But right now, trying to get inside their head, not of 30p Lee, I wouldn't wish that on any, you'd certainly have a lot of room, wouldn't you? But trying to get inside the head of Rishi Sunak, what's the plan on the refugee stuff? What's the actual plan? Ibrahim's in Preston. Ibrahim, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Good morning, James. Firstly, thank you for speaking for people who haven't got anyone to speak for them. As just want to clear that out of the way.
Sure.
You're a hero of mine, believe it or not.
You're very kind, but we must acknowledge that there are plenty of people for whom 30p Lee has become a hero in the last few weeks. So I guess that speaks to the yin and yang of the political landscape we're discussing today.
I'm not one of them anyway. So,
No.
I've got a couple of questions, I'm not expecting an answer.
Okay.
But what goes through my mind is why they don't get Tony Blair, to sit with Mr. Lee,
Yeah.
and explain to him what happened in Iraq, Libya,
I see your point. Yes.
West Africa, that led to these people jumping in the sea and dying to flee whatever is going on in there after they intervene. That's one thing. The other thing is that his comment for me personally, Mr. Lee, are really scary, because what's next after telling people to
Careful.
F off?
Yes, thank you.
What's next?
Making a list. I don't really want to spend more time discussing his desperate plea for attention, because it would involve giving him more attention. But I like the question of what's next, and we all know what's next. Violent language.
For example, if two people squared up, and one of them.
Yeah, of course. Violent language leads to violent conduct.
Yeah, that would mean turn into a physical after
Of course it would.
This sort of language.
Of course it would. The language of violence leads to acts of violence. I mean, it's just
because I've got children who doesn't. They are different in sort of color and accent to what
Sure.
Mr. Lee sounds like. I worry about my children after politician that meant to keep the place safe and in order.
Well, he has given people who are not likely to think too deeply about matters permission to speak disgustingly to people who aren't like them. And whether he knows, again, I have to say, whether he is capable of understanding what he's done, or whether he acts like a sort of Pavlov's dog, I do not know. But your first question is fascinating. This notion of why don't they explain to people what it's actually like to be an asylum seeker, what it's actually like to be a refugee, what it's like in the places from which the massive majority of these people are fleeing. And you know the answer to that. They can't allow that to happen. They can't, because then they're in the position of having to say, I mean, Priti Patel's done a tweet today where she admits, she uses the word asylum seeker in the context of who they're going to be sending to Rwanda. They're quite careful not to do that normally, but because the base line of the policy, the foundation stone of the policy, is that genuine refugees fleeing genuine persecution in genuine war zones are not welcome here.
Yeah, and of course, we would like to know who's getting in and who's getting out. We would like to know people's background and they are safe to be here. But that's not the language to go forward. Absolutely, and you're right. They should have some manners, obviously, and some plan rather than just coming out and speaking like that.
No, well, I bet they don't, and I think perhaps you've touched on what the plan probably is. It's you create the idea. You're appealing to people who don't want anybody foreign to come here, regardless of who they are or where they come from. But you can't actually say that out loud. So you pretend that it's about economic migrants. I think 30p Lee has said that in the last 24 hours. He's got absolutely no evidence for that. If he could count, he'd know exactly what the Home Office percentages are on successful applications. But you have to. So you're appealing to people that don't want any foreigners coming in here. You're appealing to National Front sensibilities. But for now, and by the end of the show today, we may have moved on from this place. For now, you can't actually say that bit out loud. And that is the policy, I think, being pursued by Rishi Sunak and Honest Bob Jenrick and 30p Lee and Suella Braverman and the rest of them, unless you can tell me otherwise. And there's not much point getting in touch to prove that you're the people they're appealing to. Yes, you're right. I don't want anybody coming here. Are they? Do you feel seen now when people like 30p Lee stand up? You as someone who thinks the National Front were right, who thinks Enoch Powell was right, is the Tory party now your home again? 0345 6060 973. It's 10:30. Thomas Watts is here now with your headline. 10:34 is the time. So Honest Bob Jenrick reveals that the scale of the asylum backlog is deliberate. If they'd worked too hard to shorten it, too many people might have come here. I mean, the absence of intelligence in that analysis is quite breathtaking. But, of course, in order to stoke up the usual suspects, he talks about 4-star hotels. He's been talking about them this morning. And we've tried to find out why. We asked Alex Chalk's office yesterday why he was talking about asylum seekers being in 4-star hotels, i.e. enjoying the same levels of accommodation that a paying customer in a 4-star hotel would routinely receive. We haven't heard back from them at all. Here's the response from Robert Jenrick's Home Office. We're not going to comment on this. So you have a government minister touring studios, obviously not this one, or rather not while I'm in it. You have government ministers touring studios stating repeatedly that asylum seekers are staying in 4-star hotels or demanding 4-star hotels or being removed from 4-star hotels. You asked 2 separate government departments in the last 48 hours, last 24 hours, Justice and Home Office, to provide us with some evidence to back up this rhetoric, some evidence to back up this claim. And they can't. They either stay silent or they simply say, no, we're not going to comment. Be so easy. Yes, of course. Robert Jenrick was talking about the Obrien Towers Hotel, just outside Stoke Pogington. It's full of asylum seekers who are somehow receiving 4-star hotel for a week on the 50 quid that is made available to them for food, or whatever the numbers are. It's just not true. So that adds to my question of what's the plan. You know, I can look at my inbox. I certainly going back through the whole 24 hours on LBC. I can look at messages coming into other shows. People are convinced that asylum seekers are staying in 4-star hotels and they're not being disabused of the notion. So whether you're talking about client journalism or whether you're talking about lying government ministers, the plan is to make people believe things that are not true in order to what? So they create an enormous backlog. They tell lies about the people on it. How does that help them win elections? 0345 6060 973. Here's honest Bob Jenrick talking through his backside earlier this morning.
Well, I think everybody chooses their own language, but the point that Lee Anderson was making is a fair one, which I agree with. I think it's
Would
disappointing.
you use that language, Minister?
Well, I think you all choose your own language, but the point he's making is absolutely right, which is that if somebody is destitute, then they would accept this perfectly decent form of accommodation, and we shouldn't have a sort of a la carte menu where you can decide which form of accommodation suits you, or you can demand to be put up in a 4-star hotel. The public would rightly be looking on that, askance. They want us to exit the hotels. They want us to save taxpayers' money so that money can be spent on better things.
So we asked the Home Office for some evidence, one example of an asylum seeker demanding to be put up in a 4-star hotel, or one asylum seeker being put up in a 4-star hotel to the same level of accommodation as a 4-star hotel paying customer, and they're just not even bothered. We're not going to comment on this, says a spokesman. We're not going to comment on this. Why not, lads? You can't admit. You're part of the blob, aren't you? Depending on what day of the week it is. It's a pitiful job working as a civil servant for these clowns, isn't it? So one day you open up the newspaper and they're attacking you for being part of the blob, and the next day the phone rings, it's a journalist asking you to provide some evidence for the latest brain fart to emerge from the mouth of Robert Jenrick, and you know that you can't because you know it's not true, but you can't say that, so you have to say we're not going to comment on this. And yet there are people up and down the country increasingly persuaded that what they're saying is true. 30p Lee being their sort of Pied Piper at the moment. So what's the plan? Where does it lead? Terry's in Birmingham. Terry, what do you think?
Good morning, and what a bunch of clowns we've got leading us at the moment. So their plan, I think, is to say to people, listen, we've got one of the most polarised things going on in the country, immigration. You've got one side arguing one point and another side arguing another point. But this shouldn't
be. I'm sorry for interrupting you already. I'm in one of those moods today. You can probably tell. Thank you. But it's not. I mean, this is part of an immigration conversation, but it's not. It's asylum seeking. When 30p Lee says that they're all economic migrants, he's lying. Again, to be fair, he's probably too thick to realise that he's lying, but he is not telling the truth.
We've already established that the Conservatives can lie to the population and get away with it. Brexit. That's already sacrosanct, isn't it? Because they've been doing that since Boris Johnson came into place.
And before,
so 500 people on a barge.
Yes.
What impact is that going to have to immigration into this country?
To 136,000 long backlog. It's not, is it?
Exactly. So what we need to do is we need to make a fundamental decision whether to let everybody in with caveats around we've got to ID people. We've got to make sure they're not criminals and all that sort of
Of course.
stuff.
Well, that's called processing the application.
Yes, exactly the same as what Tony Blair's agenda was for building the economy. Or we turn around and we say England is closed.
Yes, exactly.
The trouble is, the vast majority of our economy is built on people coming into the country from abroad to work in the health service.
Of course it is. But there is the people that Genrica is appealing to are the ones that want to close England, aren't they?
Yes, but they're the same people who want to jump up and down that they can't get a doctor's appointment, or they can't get into hospital, or their mum's not being looked after in a care home at the right price.
Yeah.
We can't have our cake and eat it, We've got to make a decision. My view is we spend this money on the NHS and hospitals and doctors and putting infrastructure in. And we say to everybody, do you know what? We're a liberal country. We've got the best freedoms in the world, pretty much. Come and live here if you like. And it's as simple as that.
Well, even under EU legislation, we'd have been able to say there are a couple of requirements in place. You've got to have a job sorted, or you've got to have X amount of quids or euros in the bank. You can't, that was one of the biggest lies of Brexit, again perpetrated by precisely the same people who are now lying about refugees and asylum seekers. You frighten me slightly, Terry, because the question of where does this lead probably contains your answer, doesn't it? It leads to edging ever closer, and this is why making 30p lead deputy chairman of the Conservative Party is pertinent. You're edging ever closer to actually saying out loud what the National Front was saying in the 1970s.
What about just letting everybody in?
No, about sending them all back.
I'm not sending anybody.
No, I know you're not, but where does the current Tory rhetoric lead? It doesn't lead to what you're calling for. It leads to what you're fearful of.
So all these Conservatives are very, very wealthy people on the whole.
Yes,
not all of them, but
relatively, not all of them.
And they all need gardeners to do their mansions and look after their grounds and look after, and serve their dinner when they go to these big functions in London. Where do they think those people are going to come from? You have to let people in. It's as simple as that. Now, the argument would be, if you're unemployed in Albania, why would we allow you to come here to be unemployed here?
Yes,
and
of course.
That's about checks and balances, isn't it? But the fundamental problem for the current population here is they perceive immigration as stopping them from getting a doctor's appointment, from stopping them from getting a decent school or a school place.
So there's never any end to... This is the thing that frightens me, actually, and it's not a word I use a lot. The thing that actually frightens me is the Orwellian image of a hamster wheel of hatred that is constantly turning, and the hamster wheel of hatred is the point. They don't want to fix it. If it stops turning, they've got nothing, particularly this lot after 13 years. What are they going to campaign on next year if they can't somehow make it this?
If they solve immigration through the policies that they're currently pursuing, then what else would they have to talk about? They'd have to talk about underfunding of the NHS, underfunding of doctors, the energy crisis in the country.
Conservative councils going bankrupt after investing in timeshare schemes. Conservative donors walking away with 29 million quid after flogging dodgy PPE to the government. Russians with whose dads and mates with Vladimir Putin getting seats in the House of Lords. I mean, all of this. Well, I'm not as daft as I look, Terry, am I? You see.
And look how long we've now been talking about.
Well, that's the point.
Somebody who tells people to F off.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about him today. I'm not talking. That's why I've done big picture today, although inevitably you keep getting dragged back to him like a, I don't know really, and like a fly to a turd. But there it is, the major plan is chaos. If they fix it, then under Terry's perfectly astute analysis, the vacancies that we currently have in various sectors get even bigger. And if they don't fix it, they can somehow... This is the calculation. I wonder how dyed-in-the-wool Conservatives, One Nation Tories, compassionate Conservatives feel about this. The calculation is the only chance we've got at the next election is to inflate lies about refugees, not EU workers anymore. It's about actual refugees or asylum seekers. We've got to inflate lies about them to such a degree that it becomes the key issue. I still can't quite believe they're that pathetic, can you? That desperate, that crass? That's, once again, it's my fundamental belief in the basic decency of humans that is holding me back from a conclusion that should perhaps be obvious. It's coming up to 10:45. What's the plan? Where does this lead? So let's identify the constituents that exist, okay? People who believe that they're all dodgy and therefore shouldn't be here. People who don't care whether they're dodgy or not, but just don't want them here because they're foreign. People who actually aren't quite sure, but would like to see a system in place that does a better job of processing applications so that people who should be receiving asylum can get it. Tories are only speaking to the first two. They're speaking to people who either believe things that aren't true or like the cruelty. Who else are they appealing to? Either you like the cruelty, which would see genuine asylum seekers being deported to Rwanda, or you believe things that aren't true, which means you have been persuaded that these people have no right to seek asylum in the first place. That's all. That's it. That's the base, is it? But how does that translate into it? Why do they not have the wit to turn around and say, you caused this crisis? You did. Happened on your watch. And honest Bob Jenrick comes out today and admits it. We've done it on purpose. And yet we're still talking about 30p Lee. It's 10:45. It's 10:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm not going to put you in Idiot's Corner, the sender of this text. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm going to treat you respectfully in the first instance. I'm not going to name the hotel that you've named because there could be sort of UKIP tribute acts turning up with banners and loud hailers by tea time. We've seen that sort of behaviour already. So you refer to a hotel in Cardiff and you write 4 stars, staff sacked, it's now used for asylum seekers. This is not hard to research. Why do you think they sacked the staff, mate? I'll tell you why. It's because it is no longer a 4-star hotel. It has a sign outside, perhaps, that has 4 stars on it, but the reason they sacked the staff is because it ceased to be the establishment that had earned 4 stars from hotel inspectors, and it became instead a repurposed building, a building where asylum seekers are accommodated at a fraction of the cost expended by customers in a 4-star hotel. And the reason I'm not putting you in Idiot's Corner is because I think that that's an honest mistake. They've sacked the staff. They've obviously massively reduced the quality of accommodation. Therefore, it is no longer under any meaningful description a 4-star hotel, but you genuinely thought that it was. You genuinely think that it is because you've been driving past it for 20 years and it's always had 4 stars outside and now it's full of asylum seekers. But the line there, staff sacked, which I presume in the hands of right-wing provocateurs gets turned into another portion of red meat, but that's why they sacked the staff. So you're proving my point. And to be honest with you, if it was really that easy to research, then the Home Office spokesperson who's told us today that they're not going to comment on the repeated claims about 4-star hotels could simply have mentioned the hotel in Cardiff that you refer to. They wouldn't have had to reply to the producer saying, we're not going to comment on this. Or in the case of Alex Chalk's office, just fail to reply completely when asked for proof. So it's not easy to research. Or rather, it is easy to research. There aren't any. And the example you've come up with, because of that single line, staff sacked, the example that you've come up with is proof that there aren't any. And that's why I'm not going to put you in Idiot's Corner yet. You can text me again and say thank you or provide a response that will let me decide whether you should have been put in Idiot's Corner in the first place. But for now, I think we all have a responsibility to appreciate the effort put into persuading correspondents like this one that asylum seekers are in 4-star hotels. If they didn't want you to believe it, why would they keep saying it even though we know it's not true? Actually, let's add that to the list of questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I've even heard cases of 4-star hotels having both, having paying customers receiving 4-star hotel treatment and then having asylum seekers being put entire families to a room and having a completely different menu and completely different food so you can see with your own eyes in the building evidence that they are not receiving 4-star treatment. But they want you to think that they are. And it's not hard to work out why. Lisa is in Abbot. Lisa, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. We spoke 3 years ago about cancelled holidays during the pandemic.
Well, you've got a better memory than me, Lisa.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. The reason I called in this morning was 7:30. I switched on the radio and Nick Ferrari's programme was on, and his question was basically, does Lee Anderson speak for you?
Right.
And it was terrifying, James, because it wasn't just a person after person, caller after caller phoning in just to say yes. they were excited, James. They were excited to say, not only does he speak for me, he speaks for everybody. I know he speaks for the majority of the people in the UK. And it was scary because it's the beginning of the culture wars.
Beginning? It's chapter 8, isn't it?
No,
well,
yes,
look, I was still on the tube at 7:30 this morning, but obviously these people do not understand the idiocy of suggesting that people have to stay in France because it's a safe country. They would otherwise be arguing that every Ukrainian who's left Ukraine should have stopped in Poland. They don't understand the international law. They don't understand the Convention on Refugees, the United Nations Convention on Refugees. They don't understand any of these things, but these are the people to whom Robert Jenrick and Alex Chalk are appealing at the moment.
And I think that what was so terrifying this morning was Nick was tapping into their feelings. He wasn't talking about facts. He wasn't giving them statistics.
Listen, I get a little bit uncomfortable when colleagues are being critiqued without a full right of reply.
I'm talking about the callers. Sorry,
okay,
I didn't mean to be. I understand that he has an audience, and of course he has a place there.
Yes, it's almost as big as mine these days.
That's that. It was the glee of the response of the people phoning in to say, yes, indeed, he does speak for me. And when I said the beginning of the culture wars, I'm talking about before the next election. This is what we're seeing now. It's the groundswell of what we saw just before the Brexit vote. And I am terrified.
That's the plan. That's the plan. You think that's the plan?
I know. Oh, my gosh. It's so evidently the plan. And I am scared that when I see these polls saying that Labour is going to get in by, 46...
stunning polls around at the moment.
I don't believe them, James. I don't believe them. I think that the people to whom, not Nick Ferrari, I'm not criticising Nick Ferrari, but the people to whom Nick Ferrari's listeners are appealing to.
Well, a lot of them are still listening to me. I mean, the numbers go up at 10 o'clock, so, a lot of them must still be around. They just tend not to ring me anymore. I think we probably all know why. It's an appeal to people who revel in their own ignorance. They like not understanding things, and they generally hate foreigners, which is why they are susceptible to the kind of lies that 30p Lee and the rest of them are punting out. I think your pessimism is healthy. I don't think anyone should be counting any chickens with regards to polls. But here's something to comfort you.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
In the run-up to Brexit, they blamed the European Union for all of their problems, whether it was Farage's Nazi tribute poster just before Joe Cox was assassinated, or whether it was lies about Turkey that Boris Johnson deployed on a regular basis, despite subsequently denying, whether it was Dominic Cummings' Facebook campaign to scare the bejesus out of people for a whole variety of reasons. It was always the EU that was to blame. So let's imagine the Tories are embarked upon a path to scare everybody senseless about the scale of immigration, which they can't really. That's 606,000 net. That's legal. So they lie
and they're not questioned.
No, but who are they going to blame for it?
They blame the asylum seekers. They blame everybody but themselves. And
but that worked with the EU. How can it work when they've been in charge for 13 years? All it takes is a little tug. Surely you can turn around to these people if you're honest and not secretly supportive of these kind of vile policies and simply say, whose fault is it?
And I think, James, that if you had more journalists that were prepared to push...
You don't have to be a journalist. You can do it. Whose fault is it? If you are genuinely furious about, 60,000 people coming over on small boats, and you're not cross about 606,000 people more coming into the country via legal routes, and all the people coming in unlawfully, or whatever word you want to use, irregularly, not coming in on boats. So they're focusing on this tiny constituents
of
people. And you say, what? Well, whose fault is it? And honest Bob Jenrick goes on Sky News this morning to say, well, it's actually our fault. We've done it on purpose.
But it doesn't matter because these people are still going to vote for them.
Keep telling the truth.
Okay. I'm reassured. Thank you, James.
Keep telling the truth. It's all you can do. There is truth and there is untruth, Lisa. And if you can hang on to the truth, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad. Hopefully. Daniel's in Enfield. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. You was asking about what's the plan going towards the next general election next year.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand these lot. I've got their number a long time ago and figured out the scam Brexit I didn't fall for. I knew what was going on. But what I think they're trying to do is get to the next general election.
Yeah.
And they will say, because they won't get people sent to Rwanda in a year. They probably know that because of all the court proceedings and everything else. And they will say, trust us to send these people to Rwanda. Labour ain't even going to do it. And that will play to certain people. You know that will, because like you say, performative cruelty.
The polls, and I fully appreciate Lisa's scepticism about the polls, and polls change, of course. But I do wonder whether, and like you, I got their number some time ago, but I do wonder whether the kind of callers that Lisa was just referring to will go. I mean, you know, the invitation to come on the radio and be vile about foreigners is as old as radio phoning. You know, it's right up there with parking tickets. It's an absolute classic for some practitioners of the genre. But who are you blaming for it? Because the Tories have been in charge for 13 years. That's the bit that fascinates me. That's why I'm confused about what the plan is. I think you're probably right that they're trying to stoke the cult, but they've been in charge for 13 years. So any problem on a campaign platform is a problem caused by them.
Yeah, but they can get away with. They can act like they're the new Tories. Like they've.
Do you think they can?
30p Lee. People will fall for that. They don't want to say. They want to almost distance themselves from the last Conservative Party or the Conservative Party, you know, under David Cameron or under Theresa May or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think they can do that. And I think with the media, how the media help them, let's be honest, there's a lot of the media really help this country be exploited by these chancers because they allow lies to
it's almost like you've read my new book that I haven't finished yet, Daniel.
I've read your first one. But,
no, that is what the whole book's about. The combination.
I paid a little bit more for it in a shop when it first came out. You know,
well, thank you.
I'm good like that.
Yeah, good for you. But you're right. And these simple things that you and I can sit here and say, don't they realise what the difference is between an asylum seeker and an economic migrant? Don't they know what the actual numbers are? Don't they understand the United Nations Convention on Refugees? And we can think it's... And you're right. And you can say, well, unless they're asked these questions and unless it's pointed out, then it will never touch the sides. But it will eventually. It has to. You cannot sustain lies forever.
Look how long that lie was allowed to propagate about the vaccine rollout. How long was the media allowing that to be propagated? For so long, we all knew it was a lie.
What was?
Then it came
Johnson claiming that he'd done a brilliant job.
No, the vaccine rollout because of us leaving the EU, which was a lie.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
That one that was being allowed to be said. That's a benefit. That was planned in 2016. How can they call that a benefit?
Still saying it
that
now.
Wasn't even. But you get the media. No, I'll give Nick Ferrari some credit. He did call that out after a long time. It did take a long time.
Did it? I don't know. I'm always I get uncomfortable with this sort of thing. But you know, I think he's friends with some of the people involved. So, but the claim that you had to be out of the European Union in order to do the vaccine rollout at the speed that we did it was a blatant lie. For the record, Daniel, I think if we'd still been in the European Union, we probably would have gone in on the shared scheme, and it would have been a little bit slower for the first 2 months than what otherwise would have happened. So, as with all conspiracy theories or lies or political propaganda, there's a nugget of truth there. So, with the asylum conversation, you start with the nugget of truth that there are people seeking asylum, and then the lies start. They're all in 4-star hotels. They're all living a life of Riley. None of them are real refugees. You know, they're all tearing up their passports and chucking them away because they're bogus. So you don't like the bogus ones, but you're not talking about the 606,000 net increase last year. I mean, it is just bonkers. I don't see at the moment how it works, because once again I find myself having a little bit more faith in the British public than perhaps the Conservative Party does. Don't know who I want to talk to next. I think we've had some really fruitful conversations in the last few years with people who would disagree with me about most things, but who retain a respect for both discourse and community. So people who I would loosely describe as one nation Tories, or I think Brexit is probably a ship that's sailed now. I don't think there's much point pretending that is still an argument worth having. But an awful lot of people who are lifelong Tories, of course, would have voted to remain in the European Union. For example, Theresa May and Liz Truss. Actually, she wasn't a lifelong Tory, was she? But I am fascinated by what you think of what's happening to your party, but I don't. It's a really strange one, this. Sometimes it goes bonkers. I guess it depends on what else is going on in the world and on how well I phrase the question. But sometimes I can fill a switchboard with lifelong Conservative voters talking to me about how they feel about their own party. I think Johnson was a bit of a pivotal point for that. You know, people who could not believe that their party had put such an opportunistic charlatan, and that's being kind, narcissistic sociopath at worst, opportunistic, sexually incontinent charlatan at best. You couldn't quite believe what had happened to your party. And I enjoy those conversations because they remind us that there's a way back. But it's got worse, not better, since Johnson went, which I don't think anybody was expecting, were they? Hand on heart. I know it took 2 hours for him to put Braverman back in the Home Office and prove that he didn't give a fig about professionalism, accountability or integrity. But I think somehow we thought it can't get any worse. And now you have a deputy chairman of the party using the sort of language that would get you thrown out of some workplaces. I mean, I want to open the phone lines to you today but I also you're going to have to indulge me a bit. I need to introduce an element of mischief to my question, because what can the Conservatives campaign on next year? 0345 6060 973. So I've got a question for lifelong Tory voters. There's 3 questions this hour. I'm spoiling you like a Ferrero Rocher addicted ambassador. I want to know what you, as can we say a traditional, because the Tory membership is not representative of the Tory vote. Most people don't join political parties. It's a little bit weird, in my opinion, to join. Don't at me, but everyone else's hobbies are weird, aren't they? Train spotting is weird to some people. Going to football matches is weird to some people. Joining a political party is weird to some people. You see yourself as a Tory, right? What do you feel about this iteration of your party, this version of your party? Question that everyone can answer, but I would hopefully get more answers from people in that first category. What can they possibly campaign on next year? 0345 6060 973. Even if you look at his ludicrous pledges, they are essentially promises to mitigate some of the enormous problems that have occurred on their watch. What would you campaign on next year? 0345 6060 973. And then the final third question. How nasty do you think it's going to get? And what's the best way to counter epic nastiness? Well, so how do you deal with a problem like 30p Leah? How do you? I put the little extra syllable on the end there as a nod towards fans of The Sound of Music, but it probably needs explaining because it was quite niche. How do you counter that? So if they get really, really nasty, if they wheel out the racist rhetoric, look, if they go full Farage, that's a good phrase. Tories are going full Farage, aren't they? You know, the messages I'm seeing saying, Enoch Powell was right and all that sort of thing. These are people to whom the Tories are appealing. They're going full Farage. It's just weird because net migration is up since Brexit. And the last time they allowed themselves to be manipulated by people promising to punish foreigners was Brexit. And that's gone backwards. It's gone in the opposite direction to what they were promised. But here they are getting furious about 15 fellas on a boat. How nasty do you think it's going to get? And how best do you counter that? 0345 6060 973. So what do you, as a Conservative councillor, a Conservative candidate, the kind of Conservative who would perhaps have lined up alongside Dominic Grieve or Anna Soubry or John Major or, I could go on, Rory Stewart. We would disagree on many issues, but we would never tell each other to F off. What do you make of what's happened to your party? 0345 6060 973. What do you think your party or your ex-party can possibly campaign on next year? What can they point to? And I don't just want Rishi Sunak's charge sheet. I want, after 13 years in government, what are the Tories' greatest achievements? 0345 6060 973. So after 13 years in government, what can they campaign on next year? And finally, do you, like me, fear that this is going to be really nasty for the simple reason? Well, because of the answers to the first 2 questions, the conclusion that things are going to be really, really horrible becomes unavoidable. Because your answer to the first question is my party's gone full Farage. Your answer to the second question is we've got nothing to campaign on except manufactured culture wars, which means your answer to the third question, is it going to be horrible, is yes. And how best do we counter it is ... 0345 6060973. So those are the questions that I want you to answer. I'm going to play you the greatest hits of Lee Anderson first, because he has become a lightning rod for precisely the sort of rhetoric that we're discussing. And as some callers pointed out in the last hour, there are plenty of people who like it, that the nastier you sound, the more ignorant and vicious you sound when talking about refugees, the more popular you become with a certain category. But I think it's important to remember who he is. They say you can judge a man by the company he keeps. You can also judge a man by whether or not he's bright enough to realise that his phone call setting up some fraud is being recorded. So I don't know how much context you need for this, but when he was on the stoop, what's the word? When he was doorstepping constituents in Nottinghamshire before the I think the 2017 election, possibly the one before, he was accompanied by the journalist Michael Crick, and he went off to the other side of the car park to set up a doorstep meeting with a friend who he was instructing to pretend he didn't know him. You'll hear all the detail in a minute. There's three things about this that are significant. The obvious and fundamental dishonesty of Lee Anderson, the abject and almost unbelievable stupidity of Lee Anderson, and the evidence of the kind of mates he has and how they look at the world. If you've never heard this before, you're in for a bit of a treat.
Let's get a few shots of you on the knocker, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So he took us across the road, and on the third door, an effusive supporter.
Hiya.
Hiya.
I'm Lee Anderson, your parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party. How you doing? I recognise you. It's Steve, isn't it? Yeah, I recognise you. How you doing, mate? All right.
Yes, I'm
just doing a bit of last-minute campaighning. Are you going to be voting on December the 12th? And do you mind me asking which way you're going to go this time?
Well, I'm going with you. There's no way Labour are ever going to get my vote again.
And he liked Mr. Anderson's very personal policy initiative this week.
I watched that video.
Yeah.
What do you mean, putting antisocial people in tents?
Yeah, I did.
He's
I
not
think
allowed
you were
to
a bit
talk
soft.
about that now.
I think you're a bit soft on it. To be honest.
Soft?
Yeah.
What would you do then?
I'd give cat and nine tails for.
Cat of nine tails?
Make them wear a pink tutu.
Pink
That'd stop them going round bullying anybody.
What about that?
I can't support this. Can we just cut there for one moment, please?
You can't support the cat of nine tails?
No, I can't support that. He's obviously got very strong opinions, but
very strong.
But I can't support that.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, mate, you've just finished my political career, haven't you?
Why? You didn't say anything there that you... How have I finished your career?
I don't know, mate. That and then that. Oh God.
But it's all happening here.
It is, isn't it? It's all happening. So.
But I mean, is this? It's almost like it's been set up for us.
Set up? Well, more than I'd realised, for it was only after Lee Anderson had left us that my cameraman producer had the chance to tell me that because Anderson was wearing one of our radio microphones, we'd managed to record him setting up the apparently spontaneous doorstep encounter beforehand. Watch and listen. You can just see Anderson on the phone behind me.
Don't just make out you don't make out you know who I am. You know I'm the candidate, but not a friend. All right. I'm at staff car park. Have a quick look. Yeah. All right, I'll see you in a minute. See you, mate.
At the time, Anderson said the call was merely about campaign material.
All right, best turn this off. Some leaflets have just come for me, so.
In all my years filming elections, I've long suspected that certain candidates have set up friendly voters to make them look that much more popular. But this is the first time we've caught some candidate blatantly in the act.
And that is a qualification these days for becoming Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Not long ago, it would have been grounds for dismissal, I suspect. That's such obvious and boneheaded duplicity. But now, in Rishi Sunak's Tory party, it actually gets you promoted, that kind of character. Just worth pointing out. After the break, 3 questions. Number 1, What's happened to the Tory? What's happened to your Tory party? 0345 6060 973. Number two, what could they campaign on next year? Pointing at their 13-year-long record. And that's not a rhetorical question. Obviously, I'm struggling to think of much, but you might actually be thinking, yeah, I know what, because there's still, whatever the polls say, there's still people voting. What is it going to be? What are you going to point at? 13 years in power, look at this, look at that, look at this, go us, boom. And thirdly, if it gets as nasty as it seems perhaps destined to get, how do you fight it? Think back to Lisa in Abbot, a genuine sense of despair in her voice, dreading the idea of essentially a sort of race-based war or a xenophobic conflagration where neighbour is turned against neighbour, father is turned against daughter, over attitudes to people who weren't born here. How do you battle that? Particularly when, as many of you have pointed out already today, particularly when so much of the media is either explicitly or implicitly, at best, an apologist for this kind of xenophobic rhetoric, and at worst, fully signed up for it. It's 11:17. 11:19 is the time. Once again, I'm thinking about that bloke who used to hang around outside Parliament shouting, "All politicians are liars," because they weren't. And they're not. But Conservative ministers now, lying is normal. Lying about it is just normal. Lying about the European Convention on Human Rights, lying about the United Nations Convention on Refugees, lying about the difference between an asylum seeker and an economic migrant, lying about four-star hotels. They all do it, and it's completely normal. And if I had been a Conservative supporter for at all, actually, then I don't know what I would make of it all. I just don't know, and I'd love to know what you make of it all. Mike's in Netherwallop, which must be in Hampshire. Mike, what would you like to say?
Indeed, it is in Hampshire. Beautiful village.
I'm sure.
Long time listener, first time caller.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm with you in as much that I don't know either. I'm a lifelong Tory. At one stage, vice chairman of the Romsey constituency.
Yeah.
We have a very good Conservative MP. It's Caroline Noakes.
Yes.
Who I would vote for because she's done a lot of good work.
Yes.
But if I decide that I don't want a Conservative government, I would need to vote against Caroline.
Gosh.
And if she doesn't get the majority, that would let the Lib Dems in. We've had a Lib Dem MP in this constituency before, and it failed miserably. So, like you, I don't know.
What has happened to your party at a national level, do you think?
I think it goes back to, dare I mention it, Brexit.
Yeah.
I think it's the
you are. I don't know whether you've picked up on this, Mike, but you are allowed to mention Brexit on this programme.
Okay, but I haven't read your book.
Sure, don't worry. It's not compulsory.
No, lockdown, we spent a fortune.
Yes.
Which I think was necessary. Somehow we've got to claw that money back. We've got to stop the strikes. We've got to get the economy back to where it was pre-lockdown. But I don't know. I don't hear any answers from the Labour. I don't hear anything from Lib Dems. And it's a case of, get the Tories sorted out and give them another 5 years, I guess.
When they seem to be talking now almost exclusively about refugees and asylum seekers, do you think that is because they don't have any answers to the questions that you've just posed?
I think it probably is, and I think there's a fear that has been spread around possibly by social media that says we cannot handle 600,000 people. Well, no, we probably can't.
Well, we currently are, of course, but I don't think that if that were to happen every year, the system would sustain.
No, but I think we have to look after these people, whether they come from Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan or wherever. We owe a debt to a lot of these people.
Shouldn't be controversial, that, Mike, should it, really? It wasn't once, and it was, and your party would have been entirely on side with that kind of attitude now, but you've got senior members of the party preaching the precise opposite. Final question, I promise. How nasty do you think it's going to get next year?
I think it's going to get very, very nasty. I really do.
Okay.
Sadly.
Sadly is the word. So there you go, common ground. We can all agree it's sad, except, of course, the people that are relishing it, loving it, and betting their house on it. Mike, we'll talk again. Make sure you've read the book by then, please. 23 minutes, I'm joking, 23 minutes after 11. Norman is in Sheffield. Norman, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
Thanks for inviting me on. You asked earlier what would make me vote for the Conservatives. At the moment, I am a lifelong Conservative,
Yes.
but I did fall out with them over Brexit.
Right.
And really, I'm totally disenchanted with the whole, setup as far as the Conservatives are concerned. I look at Labour, and I'm not really attracted to them either. But so far as the Conservatives are concerned, the only thing I think that any party could do for me would be to make moves to actually join the EEC again.
Whoa!
Brexit was a huge thing.
What would that? I mean, what would happen if that was the concern? I mean, that would just be like setting off the biggest firework in the history of British politics. I suggested a few months ago that if I was Rishi Sunak, I'd do that now because he's got nowhere else to turn. It would just completely.
I think he should do that. I think we need a firework display. I mean, the whole lot of them. It was an absolute error to leave the common market. For Brexit, it was a total error.
Well, of course it was.
But it was done by the Conservatives and Johnson. It was a nightmare. And they got rid of all of the decent people, and we're left with the shower that we have now.
Well, there's some decent people left, but they're like Caroline Noakes, actually. But they sit on. I mean, they're sidelined and largely silenced, and of course they have to sit on their hands. And some of them don't.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, the whole party is not awful. It's just the leaders and the main cabinet are pretty inept. But when I look, I'm very disappointed in Labour as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
Starmer just does not really. I think he's probably a decent chap.
Yes.
But he just does not really, excite me at all.
Have you ever been? This question's going to sound a bit odd, Norman, but have you ever been excited by a Labour leader?
No, but I did vote for what's his name?
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. I did. I think I remember voting for Tony Blair. I did like the character, and even now when I hear him, he's head and shoulders above the rest of them in political now. So I mean, it was quite a capable character.
Yes, and electorally incredibly successful. But of course, during the Brexit referendum, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't share a platform with him, which brings us back to the point that you were making at the beginning about all roads. We'll do a phone-in on that one day, Norman. What would happen if you get to March, April, May next year, June, July, and Rishi Sunak just thinks, right, what's the equivalent in a casino or something like that? It's not a casino. I'm looking for something that. You put all your... So it's the last 10 minutes of the game and you get the goal... You put the goalkeeper in the box. There we go. People who don't follow football looking at me as if I'm talking Mandarin. So you've got 2 minutes of the game left and you need to score a goal. If you don't score a goal, you're out. It's it. It's over. You're going home. So you put the goalkeeper in the opposition's box for a corner. Every single player, all 11 of your players are in about 15 yards of grass into which the ball is about to be hoofed. Now, if the other team get it, they are almost certainly going to score, or they're at least going to be able to mount an incredibly, likely to be successful assault upon your goal line because your goalkeeper is now sprinting back at 100 miles an hour, having done a full 89 minutes on the pitch, or indeed 119 if we're in extra time. But you're putting so the political equivalent of putting your goalkeeper in the box would be for Rishi Sunak to announce in July that if you elect him Prime Minister, he will start immediately the process of rejoining the European Union. What the hell would happen then? What would happen then? I suppose Keir Starmer would have little choice but to say, well, so will we. And then you're back to square, but I don't even know. I don't think we're ready to do a phone-in on this, are we? It's too counterfactual. It's too theoretical. But what would happen then if Rishi Sunak turned around and said, we have always been the party of fiscal efficiency. We have always been the party of sound economic government. And for reasons that we will explore later, we've become the polar opposite. We've become the government that essentially ushered in economic sanctions on our own population. We're reversing that process now. We're trying to rejoin the European Union. If they'll have us, vote Sunak in 2024, and I will begin that process immediately. What the heck would happen there? What would happen there? Thank you, Norman. 0345 60973 is the number that you need. The question of what has happened, I guess, can't be answered without reference to the dreaded B word. You have ushered in, post Theresa May at least, people making unkeepable promises, or people who were part of the process of making unkeepable promises. And as the consequences continue to unravel, you have to sort of offer up. I suppose if you're arsonists, this is the point. Raphael Baer very good in The Guardian today on this, although he doesn't use this analogy. If you are arsonists, if you've achieved power by committing acts of arson, whether it's Boris Johnson or Brexit, you've achieved power by committing acts of arson. What can you do when you're in power except to continue to set fire to things? So attacking Labour on environmental policies that they don't even hold, or trying to claim that because Dale Vince gives a few quid to Just Stop Oil and a few quid to Labour are somehow in bed with Just Stop Oil. It's ridiculous. Dale Vince is the guest on Full Disclosure this week. Absolutely fascinating bloke. Truly what a story. I think that drops tomorrow. But if all you've got is arson, have a look at Suella Braverman and tell me what she can do apart from set fire to things. What are you going to do in an election next year? Those are your three questions. What has happened to the Tory party from the perspective of Tory supporters? What can they possibly campaign on next year? 0345 6060973. And finally, how nasty is it going to get? Is there any way? I mean, what should Starmer do? Two Tory supporters there, very, very unimpressed with their own party, but equally or almost as unimpressed with Keir Starmer. If it gets really, really nasty and he carries on doing don't want to upset the apple cart stuff, that's going to make things worse, not better. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 11:30. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. It is 11:33 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's no Parliament at the moment, of course, so no PMQs. They're on recess, and that hopefully is part of the reason why the conversation has been dominated by this boat in Portsmouth and the 15 people on it. If normal politics was unfolding, then presumably there'd be rather more to get our teeth into. I'm not 100% sure of that. I certainly feel that we're on a very, very ugly trajectory, a very unfortunate trajectory, because the three questions that I'm asking you, unless you've got a brilliant answer to the second one, the answer to the third one has to be yes. What can you point to after 13 years of Conservative government as reasons to vote them back in again next year? And if your answer is nothing, then the question of how nasty do you think that election campaign is going to get is probably going to be very. Because if they can't actually campaign on platforms and policies and past successes after 13 years in power, then what the hell can they campaign on? Answer, we will be nastier to people we've persuaded you to be frightened of than anybody else, any other government in history. That's it. That's the ticket. That's the sell. Maybe I'm wrong. Susan's in Blackpool. Susan, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello, Susan.
I really enjoy listening to you. I don't agree with you all the time, I've got to be honest.
No, quite right too. I talk some right old rubbish some mornings.
But you really make me think.
Thank you.
And you're just a lovely person, I know you are.
What a lovely thing to say. Thank you, Susan.
I was one of the first cohort of people who turned 18 and were able to vote.
Oh, gosh.
So I guess I'm probably round about your mum's age, that type.
Yes, and you're an experienced voter, Susan, we could say.
Yes. I've worked in job centres all my life.
Right.
So I've seen different governments come and go, and obviously being at the front line, you're actually carrying out the policies of the day.
Yes, of course.
You take the flak.
Yes.
For what people don't like.
Mm.
And when all the Polish people first came, we were absolutely inundated in the job centres with them. They were marvellous, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
They really wanted to work, and they were getting all the jobs,
right,
which caused resentment with people in Blackpool. So nothing's new, is it?
No, that's very true. Nothing new under the sun.
No. But getting back to the Tories, I've always voted for them, but I can't now.
Why not?
Well, The country's just in a complete and utter mess.
Mm.
And I can't see any policies, as you say. We're supposed to spend our time talking about 50p Lee and things like that.
Yes.
Rather than...
It's 30p, Susan. I know inflation's high at the moment. But it's not that high yet.
Sorry, 30p. I've promoted him. Instead of the real issues of the day.
Yes, we do.
I'm just fed up of it like everybody else. Why can't people like you form a party?
I'm quite lazy.
Oh.
Well, I'm not lazy as such, but I don't know. I mean, there's good politicians out there. And, you know, even if the Parliament was full of paragons of virtue, we'd probably still fall for the latest provocation from an attention seeker. It's that's the problem, isn't it? And, you know, I also love this job, Susan, I've got to be honest with you. There's a bit of selfishness involved, and I don't think I'd be a very good politician. But the real problem is that the stuff that we should be talking about isn't very exciting. So, you know, talking about, I do some good phone-ins on the cost of living, but we can't do it every day. We can't.
Oh, of course not, no.
Energy and things. Can't do it every day. It's a strange old business. Is it, when you look back over your life, and political ebb and flow.
Yeah,
I agree with you that there's nothing new under the sun. But I'm 51, and I don't remember approaching a general election with quite the same sense of sadness as we're approaching this one.
No, I agree with you. I used to get quite excited, and you know.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Well,
maybe we will. I mean, maybe change is as good as a rest. But I think we're going to have to go through some pretty unpleasant times before we get to the ballot box. I really do.
Well, I agree with you. You see, what I think is Britain was the first to industrialise, weren't we? We were marvellous. Everything was here.
Yes.
And I think we reached our zenith probably around about 1900.
Yes.
And I think it's sort of gradually just gone downhill.
Well, we never replaced it either. So Germany industrialised, we didn't. We became service, all sorts of reasons. But no one can really say that out loud. Certainly not a conservative. There's a clue in the name. They want to conserve what we've already got, not have a sort of transformative agenda. And Keir Starmer is not a transformative politician from any angle at the moment.
He's always changing his mind, isn't he, on things?
That's certainly one of the accusations. But it's true as well. I mean, he has changed his mind. I think what he's doing is resisting the temptation of making any promises, because if he says we'll definitely reverse this, then they'll say, well, why aren't you going to reverse that? And why aren't you going to... So I don't know. But there comes a point where you want a little bit less pragmatism and a little bit more sparkle. But we will see, Susan. We will see.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I've loved talking to you. That was a real treat for me, Susan.
Thank you, James.
And I hope we can do it again soon. Take care.
And you. Bye.
Bye-bye. 11:39 is the time. Ellie's in Kilburn. Ellie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I'm kind of answering your middle question about what do you think they're going to campaign on next. And as a person living with disability, I can see that we're going to be the next kicking.
Oh, do you really worry? Oh,
yeah,
Lord.
Because the thing, I've lived with disability most of my adult life, and I've seen how the changes have come about. And Ian, middle name Smith, who made all those big changes with changing disability living allowance into personal independence payment and forcing everyone to be reassessed every year, no matter how traumatising that was, no matter how underqualified the assessors were, no matter how little one's condition changes from one year to the next, was a performative cruelty that went completely under the radar for the majority of the British press. And I can see that has continued and will make a very convenient next whipping boy for them if they want to. Anyone on long-term disability...
Well, they won't call you that. They'll call you long-term unemployed.
Economically inactive.
Economically inactive is part of it as well. It's so.
You know,
how
it's a way of saying that you're taking up space and not giving anything, and that's just not true.
God,
a lot of people with disabilities contribute an enormous amount to society in all sorts of ways that don't get trumpeted or noticed.
You're absolutely right. I wasn't meaning to interrupt. Sorry, Ellie. How has your life changed in the last 13 years? sort of measurably?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have been evicted from my housing during a Labour government.
Right.
And in a Labour borough, which meant that they actually did have enough housing of a suitable kind for my particular needs.
Gosh.
And that was about 26 years ago. And when I moved into my flat, which saved my life, I had benefits and disability benefits enough that I could have a bath every day. I could run my heating in the winter whenever I needed it. And I could pay all my bills and food and have a social life. And in the last years, it's been extreme because of all sorts of things outside of political control. But the fact of the matter is, I have a bath once a week if I'm lucky. I've not used the heating for the last 10 years at all, unless it was extremely cold. And I manage my money very carefully because I don't have family to depend on, and I can't get into debt because I can't get into debt, because I can't get out of debt if I get into debt.
And so this is simply the calculation between what's coming in and what's going out, limiting what you can do.
Exactly, which is, I live that way. It's okay, but I'm getting older now and I'm getting arthritis and my flat is damp, and the things I could put up with 10 years ago, I can't. And there's less money now and more pressure and everything costs more. So I'm looking at, I'm going to be 60 next year. And in my mind, that was when I was going to retire, which would have meant coming off the rat run of assessments and reassessments for disability and moving on to a pension, which would have given me a peace of mind, at least, of not being continually reassessed for everything.
Yeah.
But now it's 67, so I've got 7 more years of possibly annual reassessments, and the stress and the anxiety that affects my physical illness. I have to go into hospital often for 3.5 weeks after an assessment process because it's so distressing, which costs the NHS and social services about the equivalent I get in a month. It will cost them in each day that I stay in care.
I mean, it's inefficient, it's silly.
It's insane, backwards. Honestly, James. It's short-term performative cruelty so they can wave a thing about saying we've got yay many people off disability benefits, and then 75% of the people who are taken off disability benefits, who have the courage and the stamina and the support to go for a reassessment through a tribunal, they get their benefits back and more. But a lot die in that process. If they've got the stomach for the fight and the support. People die in the process because they're so distressed. They don't have support. They don't have the mental capacity to answer a letter within the time period, so they're sanctioned. It's really very, very distressing how this has gone under the radar. Nobody in the media wants to talk about it. Like you were saying, it's not sexy. It's not anything that's going to grab headline. Oh, another disabled person committed suicide. Another disabled person starved to death. Another person was left for 3 years and nobody noticed that they were dead in their bed for 3 years. It's very frightening, and I think this is where they're going to put their target, their enmity next.
I hope you're wrong.
I do too, but I can see it. Welfare for work and all of that is coming again. They've tried it before and it kind of stumbled and failed because they employed very inefficient profit-making companies that didn't do what they said they were going to. But I have a feeling that this is where they're going to try and put the target on our backs again. And it's bad enough. People with visible disabilities are targeted much more in the same way as our gay and lesbian and transgender brothers and sisters are suffering more and more through performative cruelty. It spreads like a cancer.
Anybody different, I suppose.
Anybody different. Yeah. That's it. Anybody different. And the more obviously different you are, the easier a target you are. I don't go out at night. I don't go out after dark because I don't really want to put myself in risk. So my world is just getting smaller and smaller with this government and other Conservative governments. And like I said, we live behind closed doors, a lot of us. I mean, some people obviously are really fighting for our rights, but for me, I'm clinging on to it by the edges, basically, and hoping they don't notice me.
I'm so sorry to hear this, Ellie, and to have so little to say in response, except comforting words. It's incredible. Who when you say people are fighting for you, who are you talking about? Maybe I could find out more about them.
Well, there's a fantastic organisation based in Kentish Town called Win Visible.
Okay.
And they support women with visible and invisible disabilities through the benefit system, through the legal system.
Okay.
They're part of a wonderful women's charity support called Crossroads Centre, and they do amazing work. I try to contribute as and when I can, maybe write a little article for their blog and so on.
Sure.
Brilliant. And contribute to supporting the reassessment of benefits and trying to put right some of the errors that were made in a white paper.
Yeah.
But, it requires stamina, which is something I don't possess, frankly. That's kind of the nature of my disability, really.
Well, I'll definitely look into that, and I'll definitely take your call next time you ring in, I promise you, Ellie. And in the meantime, all I can do is promise to keep you company, especially on the bad days. I'm so sorry to hear what you're going through, and you must know that the texts coming in suggest that an awful lot of people your words resonate with. She's 100% right. Darren adds, sadly, I don't think Labour will be helping out people like her. Judy says you speak for hundreds of thousands of people. The social contract has been broken, writes Anthony. Do we need to actually put this stuff in law? No citizen can be without housing, healthcare and basic income. But you know, and I know, that as soon as Anthony says something like that, there'll be somebody saying, well, why are we feeding people on that barge? I've seen a Daily Mail columnist today complaining that they're being fed toast. And it's such a sort of free pass, isn't it? People that have given them monkeys about anyone in any difficulty for the last 13 years, whether it's children going hungry. Same people that attacked Marcus Rashford for trying to sort out free school meals will be claiming this week we should be looking after our own. It's just crazy how, I don't know what the word is, bent, I think, how bent they are. But thank you, Ellie, on behalf of everybody whose plight you have represented. It's 11:49. I've got Chris Bryant in the studio next. Well, you know who Chris Bryant is. He's written a very interesting book, Code of Conduct, Why We Need to Fix Parliament and How to Do It, which actually there was no plan. There never is on this flipping show. It's a right old shower. But it does fit with the sense of disillusion with much of politics that has seeped through the cracks in the course of this morning's conversations. 11:52 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, joined in the studio by Chris Bryant, MP, of course, for Rhondda, and chair of the Committee on Standards, although he recused himself from that position for at least one recent investigation. Why have you written a book called Code of Conduct, Why We Need to Fix Parliament and How to Do It?
Because I think Parliament's in a really bad shape. If you just look at the statistics, 22 MPs, it might be 23 soon, but 22 MPs have been forced to stand down from Parliament for a day or more during this Parliament since December 2019, or have left Parliament before a report on their misconduct came forward for a variety of reasons: sexual harassment, bullying, trying to inappropriately exercise influence over judges, paid lobbying, a whole variety of different things. And that is by a country mile, and I understand what a country mile means is as far as you can see to the horizon. By a country mile, it's the worst Parliament in our history.
Why?
Well, I think in part it's because we are now more punitive. That is, we have, in the past, I mean, one of the things that's been much reported is that I've said that I in my 22 years as an MP, I was groped by 5 MPs, during the division lobbies. And all of that's from 15 years ago.
Right.
And so in the old system, everything was swept under the Pugin carpet. You never, if you
well, it's
told
true everywhere, right? In most institutions, actually.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, in Parliament, we have a system for dealing with sexual harassment and bullying, which is entirely confidential. Any member of staff or MP can go and make a complaint. That will be dealt with confidentially. And that has led to several MPs already being suspended from the House, including Mike Hill. And this, incidentally, is not a Tory thing entirely.
It's not partisan at all.
Not at all. It's about the whole of Parliament. And why does that matter? Because I believe in democracy. And democracy relies not just on having elections every 5 years, it relies on people having confidence and trust in their representatives.
Yes. I mean, it's about the pitch upon which politics is played, not the team that you support. And although increasingly perhaps on both sides of the Atlantic we've seen the rise of people who want their team to have an unfair advantage, actually democracy demands that everybody is both accountable and equal.
Yes, and one of the things I twigged when I was writing this book is that we have a system with very few checks and balances. Yeah. It really is winner takes it all. Once you've won a general election, as long as you command a majority in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister can do pretty much anything they want. They alone decide when Parliament sits, how long it sits for, how long it goes on holiday for, what it debates every single day of the week, how long it debates for, how many minutes or seconds we've got for each amendment to consider. Sometimes, during COVID, most of the laws on face masks and things like that were introduced not on primary legislation, which is considered in several different stages in the House of Commons, but secondary legislation. In other words, just rules that are brought out by the government. Some of them came into force before they were published.
How unique was that to that administration?
So it's grown rapidly, all of this.
Yes.
And sometimes they're known as Henry VIII
yes, of course.
Rules.
They've always been around, as that nickname suggests.
Well, and it's Henry VIII.
It's
and it's Henry VIII not because they chop your head off if you get it wrong or if you marry the wrong person,
yes.
but because Henry VIII basically used Parliament to take forward his legislation willy-nilly. And that's the problem. I think good government needs good scrutiny.
And this is part of the second part of the book, how to do it, why we need to fix Parliament and how to do it.
Exactly. So there's loads of things I think we could do. Just as, for instance, I think if a minister lies to Parliament or misleads Parliament inadvertently or whatever, if they are told by the UK Statistics Authority, who are a pretty dry bunch of people, you have to correct the record, then they should be required to do so within 28 days. If they don't, then they're out on their ear.
People are very surprised to discover that they don't have to do that you can just gloss over it, ignore it, but sort of file it away somewhere else. We point at people like Boris Johnson as egregious examples of this kind of conduct, but it has filtered right through.
Yes, and part of my argument is I think people misunderstand the term one bad apple because some people think it means, there's only one bad apple. But actually it means one bad apple spoils the rest of the barrel.
That's a very good point, actually. I think the Metropolitan Police have forgotten that on some recent contributions.
They keep on getting it wrong.
They do, don't they? I noticed that Nadine Dorries, who we do occasionally mention on this programme, has very kindly presented you with an opportunity to point out precisely the sort of standards that we should be observing in Parliament.
Look, an MP is there to represent their constituents, to do their best in their constituency and to speak up for them in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
If an MP doesn't turn up for months on end, not to speak at all or to vote for months on end, I think they should be out. We used to have a rule in 1801 that you had to get permission if you wanted to absent yourself from Parliament. That's fallen out of use. Maybe we should bring that back. But if you were a councillor in Bedfordshire and you didn't turn up for 6 months, the council would have to have a vote on whether to allow you to carry on for a while. Why don't we have that for MPs?
And how likely are you to get a result on this?
I think we'll win.
Do you really?
Yeah. Why don't
you just turn up that afternoon and deliver a speech?
Well, I look forward to it, and I will intervene to ask her some other questions. Look, I mean, it is an irony, isn't it, that the person who is a notorious publisher of fiction doesn't understand the terms with immediate effect.
Well, you I don't know if you're familiar with the Dorries Watch feature that we've been doing on this programme, but it's now 2 calendar months, 9th of June to the 9th of August.
But you see, my bigger point, we're laughing about this.
No, it's not funny.
But
it is funny, but it's also awful.
But in the end,
yes,
what we've got is, it used to be around about 45% of people in the country thought that all politicians were a waste of space and crooks and liars and all the rest. This kind of thing means that 80% do now. And why that really worries me is because then the really cynical, hard right, hard left manipulate that. I was in the gym. I know it's difficult to believe, but I was in the gym in Ustrad in the Rhondda, and a lad came up to me, maybe 19-year-old. He's a bit interested in politics, but not much. And he said, look, this was the day after the report had been published on Boris Johnson and whether he lied to Parliament. And he said, if Boris Johnson gets away with lying like this, there's no point in any of us voting. And I think that that's the problem with all of these, both the systemic problems of winner takes it all and the individual problems about misbehaviour.
Yeah, I mean, it's like lights going off in a tower block. People just disengaging the more evidence they see of what you detail encyclopedically in this book, Code of Conduct, Why We Need to Fix Parliament and How to
And
Do
I hope entertainingly as well.
It is entertaining. Indeed, as Reverend Richard Cole says on the front cover, it's absolutely riveting. And some idiot has written, takes a bulldozer to the crumbling edifice of parliamentary standards as well.
Some idiot called James O'Brien, perhaps.
I've never heard of him. It is out on the 17th of August, although it is available for pre-order now, and actually it probably starts creeping into shops around now as well, the way things
I saw one
there you go.
a shop.
What was that like, just out of interest?
Well, you know exactly what it's like that moment when you first see a book.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm honest, there's part of me that's a bit frightened about the book coming out because, you know, anybody who writes a book about standards, I'm not a perfect person, as you know, and I say that quite often in the book. There are times when I've had to apologise. I've got things wrong. I'm sometimes very pompous and sanctimonious. I try not to be, and I fortunately have a husband who tries to, who makes sure, who tells me regularly 10% less.
Very healthy.
But there is always the danger that if you write a book like this, you've basically got a target on your back.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that people will take at face value the things that I want Parliament to work. I was partly brought up as a kid in Spain under Franco, which was a dictatorship. And when I was training to be a priest in the Church of England, I spent time in Latin America, in Argentina, which had just come out of dictatorship. Some of my friends have been tortured. I've been one of the longest standing critics of Putin's Russia.
Yes.
I know what dictatorship is like, which is why defending, if democracy was worth fighting for in 2 world wars, it's worth reforming today. And that's why I want a great reform act as soon as possible.
That's beautifully put. And actually just dropping those 2 little nuggets of biographical detail into the conversation about Franco and training to be a priest gives me an opportunity to remind you that Chris was a guest on Full Disclosure a few months ago, and that interview is well worth revisiting. And indeed, this book is well worth reading, Code of Conduct by Chris Bryant, coming soon to a bookshop near you. Chris, always a pleasure.
Likewise. I hope your book's finished.
Nearly there. Monday.
On time?
Yeah, Monday. It'll be finished. Honest. It's like my mum.
Oh, I don't know. Journalists with their promises. That is politicians.
They need a code of conduct. It's 12:02. It's 6 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I'm going to do something completely different next. I've got this weird relationship with vegetarianism. I don't know how much you've listened to the programme over the years, but I've been on a journey. That's what you have to say these days. I've been on a journey. I have been on a journey. I used to be an idiot. There's not that many subjects where I have to preface the conversation we're about to have with that admission, but I was a real idiot, and I worked out why, really, on vegetarianism. It is an awful lot of bad behaviour comes from a place of shame and guilt. All right, I don't want to get all therapy on you. I usually like to give you fair warning when I'm going to do that, but it comes from a place of shame and guilt. So the more unpleasant one appears, the more shame and guilt one is dealing with. I guess that tallies with 30p Lee and the conversations we had earlier in the programme. And the more shame and guilt you are dealing with, the easier it is to persuade you to hate other people and to behave in terrible ways. So the reason why I was unnecessarily obnoxious about vegetarians in particular and vegetarianism in general was because somewhere inside I agreed with them, but I lacked either the wit or the motivation or the will to join them. So, in fact, a great thing a therapist said to me once, when you point a finger at someone else, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. So every time I was obnoxious to a vegetarian, I was actually, if you like, projecting my own disappointment in myself, my own shame and guilt that I was not as disciplined or as principled as you, as a vegetarian. And I did the same thing with obese people. I used to think it was hilarious to mock obese people, but obviously I was overweight myself and conscious of the fact that it was possible not to be overweight, but I lacked the willpower or the motivation to do that, and therefore people who were very overweight, much more overweight than me, I took out my residual guilt and shame, or self-loathing would be a bit strong in this case, but by being obnoxious to them, I was kind of projecting my own disappointment in myself, because I haven't eaten less and exercised more. I remain above my fighting weight, and therefore people who've really struggled become a sort of whipping boy or girl for my own issues. So there's two great examples, vegetarianism and obesity. The more performatively cruel somebody in the public eye is about either vegetarians or obese people, the more they need therapy, would be the nice way of putting it. The more they secretly hate themselves, or bits about themselves, elements of themselves, would be the slightly unkinder way of putting it. And that I think is pretty close to watertight as an argument. The louder someone shouts, eat less and exercise more, the more ashamed they are of how they look with their shirt off. The more stupidly someone talks about vegan sausage rolls or you're wearing leather shoes, you, the more oddly conscious they are that eating meat is probably wrong. And now we arrive at a very, very strange place together. And I know a lot of you have enjoyed these conversations over the years, up to and including the young woman who rang in wants to call me, what was it? A corpse-munching psychopath. And with a straight face as well, a corpse-munching psychopath. On the question of this story, I want to come at it from 2 or 3 different angles. I'm going to tell you that some vegetarians of my acquaintance have started eating meat again on medical advice. Now, I don't want to phone in from nutritionists fighting with other nutritionists. And I'm sure there are other ways of getting various bits into your diet. But if the doctor says you should probably be eating some meat twice a week or something like that, then you are going to think twice about your decision to be a vegetarian. That's part of the conversation. But what really drives this inquiry for me, there are 2 elements of this. Beyond Meat, not that long ago, this is a single company, Beyond Meat, it looked like it was about to take over the world. Do you remember? Now, they must have had good marketing and hype and what have you, but also they had great products. And Beyond Meat were routinely described, along with some other companies, as achieving the holy grail of meat that wasn't meat. So something that looked like meat, tasted like meat, cooked like meat, but didn't actually involve killing animals. It was a laboratory-produced or plant-based product that did not involve animals in any way, shape, or form, and yet had juices coming out of it that looked like blood and had, and a stuff. And I always struggled slightly with it. I never told you this at the time. I always struggled slightly with it because it just didn't quite. It didn't quite land with me. I didn't quite know who it was appealing to. So a lot of people I know who are vegetarians were put off eating meat by the visceral nature of it, by the fact that it was so obviously organic. And I mean that in the sense of coming from an organ. And the idea of copying some of the stuff that put people off being vegetarian just looked a bit, and then I looked at the numbers and I looked how well it was selling, and I saw that McDonald's had stocked it and that Pret a Manger were opening up entire shops dedicated to veganism or vegetarianism, and I just thought, nah, you've got that wrong, mate. You've just got that wrong. People love this stuff. But I never loved it myself, and I don't think I ever even tasted it. I just couldn't quite, I don't know why, I was weird. So part of this phone is going to be, how weird am I? Or do you know what I'm talking about? And another part of it is going to be, what's gone on here then? So Beyond Meat has seen its sales fall by about a third in the past 3 months compared with the same period last year. Now, that is astonishing. And you might think, oh, they must have some new rivals. But that's not it, because Meatless Farm, which was a British supplier of fake meat, has gone into administration. Pret a Manger, which I mentioned a moment ago, has over the course of the last year closed half of its vegetarian and vegan-only stores. Supermarkets, I've noticed this, have been reducing the number of vegan products on their shelves. One report today suggests as shoppers search for better value products. They see there was a premium on these products, but we presumed the premium would disappear as the popularity increased. So the costs come down as the scales go up. Everybody knows that. And the latest figures for McDonald's, for Beyond Meat, show that the company's share price has now dropped by 20%, meaning that its value since 2019 has fallen by 95% since its peak. Now, what's going on? question number 1, 0345 6060 Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, Morrisons and Waitrose have shrunk their provision of meat alternatives by about 10%. So shoppers are either bored of these products, they've gone off these products, they've given up vegetarianism, they don't like the gimmicky ideas, or they've gone back to basics, going back to eating pulses and grains instead of fake meat all the time. And that's why I say there are at least 2 questions here. Was fake meat a flash in the pan? 0345 6060 and why was it a flash in the pan? I'm really interested in that, actually, and I'm conscious of not having set this up as well as I want to, because I don't want to get the usual conversation about, you should be a vegetarian and you shouldn't, or it's silly, of course you can get everything you need. I want to talk about fake meat and this weird sense I had, but never fully articulated, that it was a really weird thing to do. The only vegetarian, occasionally a vegetarian will tell you that they really miss bacon, but they rarely told you that they really missed like an oozing joint of beef, trying to make non-meat products as much like meat as possible. Now that you look back on it, was it all a bit bonkers? 0345 6060 It might be simpler than that. It might just be the cost. It might just be the premium on some of these products, or it might be something that I've missed. It might be something more subtle or more nuanced. But I never once thought, and even though I've cut down on red meat in the last few years for the same reasons that everybody has cut down on red meat, but I'd have some fish perhaps, or I'd have a salad. I never once thought I'll have a meat alternative. I'll have I'm going to call it fake meat. I never once thought I'll have fake meat. I'd go into Greg's, I'd get a cheese and onion pasty instead of a vegan sausage roll. I love sausage rolls. I particularly like Greg's sausage rolls. But I never, standing in the queue, looking at what they had, thinking, all right, I won't have a sausage roll today and I won't have a steak bake. I'll have the cheese and onion, which is largely, it's basically a carbohydrate sandwich. It's got a lot of potato in it, but it's tasty. And it's not, look, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not as tasty as a sausage roll or a steak bake, but when you've decided that you're going to cut down on meat, you make changes. And oddly, I never went for the vegan sausage roll. My daughter loves them. Although you don't get the egg wash on the pastry, so you don't get quite the same golden finish or the same crisp finish. But I've never taken, I'd still get a meat one every now and then, but I never get, and I don't quite understand why. So I think this conversation is in large part about whether or not fake meat was a flash in the pan, if you pardon the pun. 0345 6060 it's also about why you think fake meat is falling or failing. I don't want to wish oblivion on any companies, any commercial entities with employees. 0345 6060 What do you think has happened? What do you think has happened here and why? And this is much, much harder to do, and the plural of anecdote is never data. But does this story suggest that vegetarianism or veganism might have peaked? So the Times reports analysts saying the hype about veganism is now well and truly over, which is interesting, isn't it? The hype around veganism is now well and truly over. 0345 6060 is the number you need. I'm looking forward to this conversation, but keep it friendly, all right? Keep it clean. 19 after 12 is the time. Fake meat, what's going on? 0345 6060 I could have just done that. Probably would have been better. Elaine's in Richmond. Elaine, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
I'm really pleased to talk to you.
Gosh, so me too. Thank you.
Well, here you go.
Yeah.
I'm vegan. Prior to that, I was vegetarian for most of them. Well, sort of went that way when I was about 12 because meat disgusted me naturally and I couldn't bear to eat it. It used to make me gag.
Yes, fair enough.
Very, very healthy person, 66 in a few weeks.
Gosh.
Extremely healthy, just the right weight, no medications, really healthy. I'm also an excellent cook.
This isn't a dating site, Elaine. I don't.
Shame. No, just to say, the fake meat thing has puzzled me a great deal.
Yes.
But I think it's served. I hope it's not going. I've noticed it's less in the supermarkets. I've just been shopping myself. I'm actually in the midst of unpacking my shopping. And I always look at Aldi, Lidl, or wherever I am, because they claim to have this big vegan selection. And I've noticed at one point, Aldi, I've got massive adverts at the moment showing all their vegan products on their commercials. They did at one point have quite a bit, but now they've got very, very little indeed. So something shrinking is happening.
Yes.
But I actually don't think, I think it's the supermarkets giving up on it. Because I have heard on many occasions people going, excuse me, where's the plant-based stuff? Where's the plant-based stuff? And I hear it a lot. And I hear managers of these stores going, we don't seem to have that much now.
But that's chicken and egg. I hope that's not offensive to you. That's chicken and egg, because the supermarkets would only do that if it wasn't selling, wouldn't they? I think.
No, I don't think so, James, because last week I spoke in the local Lidl to where I am and said, excuse me, at one point you had vegan parmesan, you had a much bigger cabinet, where is it? And he just went, I don't know, madam. He said, we just put out what's being sent to us. And I said, and he said, a few people have asked me today. So I think we're being steered by the big manufacturing supermarket control freaks away from it.
Why would they want to do that, though? Because they've just gone all in on it.
I think the products are a bit more expensive to produce.
Right. The margins aren't as high, but they wouldn't. I think we'll agree to disagree on this. I think they would. They'd only take it off the shelves if it wasn't selling at the price that they need to sell it at as a profit. They wouldn't, and that means people aren't buying it. They're not looking at. They're not. There's no sort of ulterior motive behind this. I don't think they just don't sell well.
I think I tried fake meat.
Did you? What did you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had early on a few vegan sausage rolls from you know where.
Yeah, they're all right by all accounts.
They're all right. Yeah. They're quite nice. But there again, I haven't actually tasted a sausage roll for 30 years, so I've got nothing to compare it with.
That's a fair point.
But and I also have tried early days when I was vegetarian, Linda McCartney's range, when she brought out veggie sausages, and because a heck of a lot of people did.
But they were vegetables, though, weren't they? They were just like tubes of vegetables rather than.
No, they tasted quite a lot like meat.
Oh, they did they? Forgive me.
Oh yeah. She did like chorizo flavoured and things like that. She was the first person, wasn't she?
She was a pioneer.
She was. I think it's processed, James. I think most vegans are very, very alternative about wanting to have no chemicals, not only just animal products and dairy products. I think all this stuff that they're selling that's on the shelf as vegan or vegetarian is just as processed as cheap sausages or anything like that.
That's exactly right.
So if you've chosen to go down the complete vegetable route and pulses and beans and everything like me, you don't eat anything with additives. You wash everything thoroughly. You try and buy organic. You use lentils. Everything in my massive store cupboard and my fridge is as natural as I possibly can.
So it's full of additives and salt and and that's the point. So that because it's been made by scientists, not by chefs or butchers, really.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
May I
it,
make
isn't
one
it?
other really important point?
Yeah,
And I did say to your lady on the phone, see, because I'm left of centre, my politics are left of centre, and everything about climate change is linked with my choice as well for my conscience.
Okay.
Animal husbandry is linked with, if you go to any organisation now, it doesn't matter if it's any organisation linked with XR or Just Oil, all the alternative organisations are saying that climate change, including Chris Packham and George Monbiot, we're all saying that animal husbandry, feeding animals, destroying the rainforest, destroying crops, cutting down trees, for animal agriculture is the biggest contributor, more than gas and oil, to pollution on the planet.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. Gets overlooked a lot during these conversations, doesn't it? Apart from some slightly, schoolboy comments about cows and methane and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, it's a huge reason.
That's the truth, James.
Even if I'm not challenging you. I'm just pointing out how often it doesn't get mentioned in these conversations.
So my whole life thoughts are climate change, what we can do, and the statistics are that what our obsession with meat eating is destroying rainforests. It's destroying.
And that you've done. This is a brilliant call, Elaine, because that, of course, explains why they were trying to make fake meat from an angle that we'd both overlooked. They're trying to make fake meat for people who don't really worry about animals dying, but who did want to acknowledge the environmental impact of animal farming. So here's a lovely juicy burger. And so it's not you. It was never aimed at you. It was never aimed at you. It was aimed at me.
It was. And I felt really grateful when people started to say, oh, I've actually made a curry with corn, and I quite liked it. My meat-eating friends. And I would say, brilliant, please carry on, and then cut out the corn and put in cashew nuts.
Or just have a dal. Just have a dal, for goodness sake. You don't need a blooming corn curry. You can have a dal. Or, as you say, some nice chunks of...
I can cook, and my food's fantastic, and everybody says so. And I just have a fridge full of veg and pulses and beans, and it's tasty.
I don't doubt it. I don't know, but there it is. I've got to crack on, otherwise we'll be here all day. But what have you bought? Actually, I was going to ask what was in. So is your bag still on the table in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Go on, just empty it for me now.
Should I take a picture?
No, just empty it for me now. Item by item. Just take 5 items out, one by one, and tell me what they all are.
4 huge raw beetroots, a Galia melon, some figs, some spinach, 10% broccoli.
There you go.
Huge tomatoes.
Yes. What are you going to do with the beetroot? How do you do the beetroot?
I'm going to pickle it raw.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, with lime juice, olive oil, salt and pepper, and a bit of sumac.
Nice.
Slice it thin, put it in a container, and let it soak overnight.
Make sure it's clean.
MasterChef, when they go, that lovely fresh pickle.
Yes, I do.
On the side. That's
so you
how
slice
you
it quite thinly. Do you ever cook it? Do you ever do pantsaria, as the Greeks call it?
Constantly.
That's delicious as well.
I eat it every day of my life because dark purple vegetables are the best for you. Anything purple.
I eat quite a lot of beetroot, but not as much as you, and I still... How can I put this delicately? I still have a bit of a panic attack when I visit the bathroom.
So does my daughter.
How long did you eat beetroot for before you stopped having panic attacks when you visited the bathroom?
I never really panicked.
Oh, did
but
you
my
not?
daughter, who's in her 20s, every so often will say to me, Mum, can I just mention something indelicate on the phone? I'm like, she goes, I think there's blood in my poo. And I'm like,
yes.
I made a beetroot risotto last night.
There it is.
Oh, okay, fine, bye.
Well, I'm glad it's not just me. Elaine, thank you. I don't know whether we succeeded in being indelicate there or remaining delicate, but it's always nice to know. It's always nice to know you're not alone. Something strange going on here, the fake meat thing. It's mad, isn't it, how a craze can come along, but it's usually sort of things in school playgrounds. What were those weird things? Those spinny things called? They weren't called spinny things. Something spinners. But maybe fake meat is going to. Maybe fidget spinners. That was it. Maybe fake meat is going to go the same way. We'll find out. I think that was such a good call. It's taken me pretty much all the way up to past. Mark will be up next after this. What is the question? Kind of various as ever on this programme. A question about why fake meat appears to have fallen out of favour so spectacularly and so quickly. For a company to see its share price drop by 95% in 4 years is big news, not least because everybody thought it was going to be the future. The chief executive of the firm has indeed blamed the meat industry for stoking fears that vegan foods were overly processed and unhealthy. But then we just had a vegan on the line endorsing that idea. I'm sure that some vested interests perhaps have contributed to it, but people stopped buying something. It was aimed at meat eaters, I think, more than that was a mistake. In my setup is thinking, well, they're trying to appeal to vegetarians who miss meat. They were actually trying to appeal to meat eaters who wanted to eat less meat. So why hasn't that worked? You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The time now is 12:30. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines. It's 33 minutes after 12, and the bottom has fallen out of the fake meat market, it would appear. And I'm just trying to work out why. And also, I mean, I can't say why. Give me a ring and tell me why I never tried it. Despite living with vegetarians, I never tried it. I don't know why I never tried. I genuinely don't know why I never tried it. So don't use me as an example. Use yourself. You too should have been on board with fake meat, but you just never. You could never bring yourself to try it. Why? It's just weird. Mark's in Reigate. Mark, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, that first caller was so good. She
Wasn't
pretty
she
much
great?
wiped out
Wasn't she
most of
great?
everything I was going to say. Really.
I'm sure you'll step up to the plate, mate.
Yeah, I've been racking my brains and I've thought of something. So I reckon that those fake meat products, they're actually more like transitional products. So when you're going vegan, they kind of really help with your sort of your withdrawal symptoms from meat, let's say. But after about 6 months, you start to actually not want to eat meat, or not like the smell of it, or not like the taste of it. So, for example, if someone puts a Beyond Burger in front of me, it makes me heave, just like a normal burger.
Well, that's kind of what I was nudging at in the introduction.
Yeah.
So you're not describing yourself here. You gave up meat quite a long time ago, and
5
you never
years
got.
ago,
And did you use fake meat as a gateway to veganism or vegetarianism?
I did. Well, what happened?
Oh, you
is
did.
when I first gave it up, there weren't an awful lot on the shelf. So I used to go to the supermarket and I just come out with just fruit and vegetables. And I'd be like, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
But there is one point I'd like to make. When I was eating meat, I used to consume about 50 ingredients a month. That was what I worked out to be. Yeah, 50. And now I consume between 150 and 250 per month.
Which is brilliant for your bio. What's it called?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've done it biodiversity. So whatever it is, though, I mean, people that are struggling and they're being told they need to go and eat meat, probably they're not increasing their dietary range when they go vegan or vegetarian. So that's something that I think people need to look into. But those meat substitute products that we're talking about, they're not.
Who buys them then?
People that are probably just trying to cut down on the amount of meat that they're consuming, and people that are transitioning into veganism or vegetarianism. But they're also, when you eat them a lot, because they're like you mentioned before, they're developed by scientists, that they make you feel a bit ill. If you have 3 or 4 of them in a row, like every night for dinner, you won't feel very
You mean
well.
4 nights running, or 4 burgers in one night?
No, well, depends on who you are, doesn't it? But, no, I'd say, like, if you have it like 4 nights in a row, I don't think you feel very well. And that's feedback that I've had from other people that I know as well.
That's interesting.
Just like,
That's. I mean, it is the ingredients list. It's because I remember when I buy it, I always try and get like pea protein based rather than soya based or something like that. But you're still reading something that looks a little bit more like a laboratory experiment than a menu. I like that. Thank you, Mark. The cost is a big part of it. I personally love fake meat, says this texter. Unlike your previous caller, I used to love bacon and beef before going veggie, but I did so for environmental concerns. I don't really care how processed the food is. You should do. Trust me. But the simple answer is that it just costs too much now. And I bet if you investigated other food products going for around £20 a kilo, you'd see a lot less of those being sold as well. I love that message from Gateshead. Where's it gone? Is it? Here it is. This is nice from Helen, who's in Gateshead, giving a shout out to Saltwell Park, where hopefully our friend is shifting coffee like it's going out of fashion in the Prism Cafe in Saltwell Park. He gave us a ring on Monday. She says, is it anything to do with woke? I may be a million miles off, but maybe the anti-woke rhetoric is stopping people wanting to appear parts of the tofu-eating wokerati. Tofu's not fake meat. I don't think tofu sales would have been affected by this necessarily, would they? I haven't seen any. It's the actual sort of laboratory, the science mission. I thought it was going to change the world. But I should never, ever offer up strong opinions on the programme without any personal investment. Sort of thinking, this is going to be huge because lots of other people are going to do it. It's funny, because I was never going to do it. I don't know whether I just thought, one will come along eventually. I used to read the stories about steaks. They're going to have fake steak soon. Fake steak? There'd be a fake steak bake before you know it. Make fake steak bake. I didn't want to try it, and I don't know why. And that, I think, is a bigger part of this story than some of the coverage lets on. Lots of people who would quite like to eat less meat, who weren't fully on board with the processed argument, didn't really know their onions, and didn't want to try. Thought they wanted to try it, but actually when presented with it, didn't do it. I don't know why. Why would that be? Liam is in Newcastle. Liam, what would you like to say?
Oh, it's Luke. Sorry, James.
Mate, I don't even know how I got Liam then. I just glanced at the screen. Sorry. Luke is in Newcastle.
That's all right. I used to get Lee for some reason. But
how did you know I didn't have a Liam in Newcastle on the other line and that I was coming to you next?
Good question. Yeah. I'll just have to guess.
Well, you called it right. You called it right, Luke. What would you like to say?
No, I was just going to say I'm the classic consumer map of what's gone wrong, because when these fake meats started coming out, I was like, brilliant. I love meat, but I want to be better for the environment. I want to ideally help more animals, I'll switch to this. Managed it for about maybe a few months, if that, and then gradually just went off it. And I bet if you looked at my sales record, it's done the same as the share prices for these firms. Just gradually tailed off.
Did you migrate back to meat?
Yeah, I try and eat less meat now, and if I do buy meat, we try and get it local from farmers. But I appreciate I'm quite privileged in being able to do that.
Yes, of course. I appreciate you.
In recently, I've been looking into processed food. A really good book, Ultra Processed People, I've been reading, and it is quite terrifying what actually goes into a lot of food that you just assume to be healthy.
Yes.
And unfortunately, fake meat is terrible for that. And I think it
does that. I haven't read this book. I keep meaning to. I was going to read it on holiday, but I had to write my own. Does fake meat come in for a particular scrutiny in Chris Van Tulken's book?
To be honest, it doesn't cover that in so much detail. He's more over like the industry in general.
But it's increased our consciousness of ultra-processed food enormously.
Yeah, you only have to look at the back of the label, what's on it, and it's just so much that it is just exactly that. It's created in a laboratory.
So what was it, do you think? Let's think, I mean, you might not think this is interesting, but I do. What happened when you felt yourself reverting?
I just didn't find it appealing. There's something about it that you just miss whether it's the smell, the texture of actual meat.
Also, everything's
the energy factor on it.
Oh, you picked up on that side of it. Yeah. Is it anything to do with the fact that it's all the same? So if you ate 100 Beyond Meat burgers in a row, they'd all be exactly the same. But if you eat beef burgers, they're all a bit different. No, it's not that. It's not that, is it?
I mean, yeah, it varies where you're buying the meat from, I suppose. It's going to be different if you buy from a restaurant other than somewhere cheaper.
Yeah. The word I'm looking for is homogenous. Homogenous.
A good part of it.
It's homogenous. You order it, you know what you're going to get. Whereas if you order it in a restaurant, you don't know what you're going to get. It was a brilliant. Did you see? Flipping out. It was a brilliant program on, and very, very rarely. Tom Kerridge's new show on BBC Two. He's sort of following people opening up new restaurants.
Oh, I'll definitely catch that.
You want to check that out. The burger place. These lads who've run a burger place, they've just opened one in Cheltenham, unless it was a repeat and it's been there for ages. Oh, man alive, I haven't seen burgers like that in my life. I'm doing Cheltenham in October at the Literary Festival. I shall be definitely going to sample some of their wares. And that's the point. If it was a fake meat, no one's going to go, I'll definitely go and try that, because it's the same stuff, it's the same patty that you get I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. Thank you, Luke. Take care. Matthew's in Birmingham. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How you doing?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about fake meat. I listen to your show nearly every day, and often when you bring up vegetarianism or veganism, I cringe a bit.
Hey, I've been a lot better lately. A lot better.
You have, but I still feel like you don't get it, because vegetarianism is very different to veganism.
Yes, I know, I get that. I'm not stupid.
Is entirely about animal welfare. So the vegan burger explosion is a kind of the meeting of the ideology of veganism and also the capitalism of the vegan burger brands. Yes. What I think is a lot of those products, there was a bubble. As veganuary has become more and more popular the last few years, I went vegetarian in 1989, age 9, and vegan in veganuary 2017. And at that point, there was no Greggs sausage rolls, there was no M&S pigs in bacon, pigs in blankets, vegan style. More and more of these things are coming out every time, and there was an explosion. And as one of your earlier callers said, it was an easy transitional food, because you think of something that's very meaty, it's the vegan equivalent. But neither meat, someone following a healthy diet, whether they're an omnivore or a vegan, is unlikely to eat a burger. every day.
Yeah,
or
true.
even every week.
Yeah.
When they first came out, similar to your last.
Yeah, but
caller,
a fake meat burger doesn't have. I mean, at first, it didn't seem to have any of the health implications that a burger would have.
No, but one of your earlier callers mentioned Linda McCartney, and I grew up on, corn burgers, the little dry things that they were, sauce mix and burger mix, which was like a dry soya powder you reformulated yourself, and then eventually Linda McCartney was the big one that came out. So this is like mid-90s, way before Beyond and stuff.
Yeah, I know all that. Sorry, I don't want to sound dismissive. I know all this. Are you challenging the notion that the market is shrinking? You're saying it's just got more diverse.
No, I'm not challenging the notion the market is shrinking. I think the market it's potentially shrinking somewhat because there was a bubble of companies and products that has naturally rescinded.
But the supermarkets are stocking 10% fewer.
But if you
products.
go to Aldi now have an entire freezer of plant-based stuff and a section in the fridge.
Yeah, but they've got 10% less than they had a year ago.
Yeah, but veganism is still growing year on year, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to equate.
No, I'm not. Do you eat fake meat?
Burger sales with a reduction in veganism? Because
lots of
people.
No, it's all right. We're not doing that. Let me ask you some questions. I want to learn from you. What do you eat fake meat?
I do. Yeah.
How often?
Not very often. Probably once a fortnight.
And why? Because a lot of people in your position are repelled by meat and are repelled by fake meat for the same reason, like Elaine, the first caller.
Because I like to eat a range of food. I cook from scratch most of the time. I make all my own pasta sauces, rice dishes, stuff with tofu, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes, you know what? I want a burger.
Okay.
And I don't always eat one.
So the urge is for meat, really?
No, the urge is for a delicious flavour combination of crunchy, soft, sour in a bun. Like I couldn't tell you what a meat burger tastes like.
Which can only be provided by either meat or a scientific formula.
Yeah,
you can't make it with your usual ingredients.
But you can, because I make really nice bean burgers with quinoa
but that's
and
not.
black
You're
beans.
not. You're not getting the same kick from a bean burger. You're craving meat.
I think you are. By the time you've
well, then why do you eat
homemade
the other
sauce
ones
and
then?
Salad and stuff on it.
Why do you eat the other ones then?
Generally convenience. You go into any little tiny pub anywhere in the country now, and the chances are you can find a proper vegan burger where you couldn't 5 years ago. They'll still be on the menu because
yet the purveyor, the biggest. I mean, the one company's gone into administration, and another has seen its share price drop by 95%.
Sure,
I don't quite.
Beyond is the apex of the most expensive vegan burger at £5 for two in a shop.
Yeah, in a sentence,
you can buy two frozen ones for £2.
In a sentence, what is the point you're making, Matthew?
Is that if you're vegan for the animals, fake meat is going to exist whether or not you eat it, and watching it peak and trough based on market forces is not really a fair reflection of the attitude of people in this country towards veganism. It is a response to the attitude towards fake meat.
To be fair, I thought you were going to use a lot fewer words than that when I said in a sentence, but I don't think that's the phone-in we've been having, really. Just interested in why people are turning away from these particular fake meat products, and crucially, why they never quite floated my boat. But it's always good to hear from you. It's 12:46. It is 10 to 1. Henry Riley is here with a little scoopette. What have you got, Scoop?
Well, James, we found out that a review has now been ordered by the Conservative Party chairman, Greg Hands, looking at officially how the London Conservatives operate. So I understand the review has come after pressure from Conservative MPs, many of them representing outer London boroughs, regarding the selection, mostly, of their candidates to be the London mayor. You'll recall last month, James, on the 19th of July, Susan Hall was confirmed as the candidate. There were 11.
How can anyone be unhappy about that?
Well, there's some discomfort in the party among some of the MPs.
Well, she's a brilliant politician. She's the one who said that Kwasi Kwarteng's budget must be brilliant because people like me were criticising it.
Well, there were 11 candidates that she overcame, and then it was whittled down to 3. It was Susan Hall, Mozamel Hossain, and Daniel Korski. There was criticism about that as well because the former Downing Street advisor had to pull out after an allegation of sexual assault, something he denies. But one of the main criticisms was why Paul Scully wasn't on the list. He is an MP. He's been the Minister of London for 3 Prime Ministers, and there was a lot of sort of speculation as to whether he was being deliberately omitted. But this review, I understand from what I've been told, it's going to look at the whole of London politics, they say, so as not to cause any...
Shouldn't they have waited until after the election? Because it does look as if they're saying, how did we end up with this menace as our candidate?
And I think that's going to pile a lot of pressure on Susan Hall, really. I mean, I was talking with Richard Barnes.
She may not notice.
I was speaking with Richard Barnes, James, who is the former Conservative Deputy Mayor of London, and he made that very point that actually it does undermine Susan Hall.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be damned annoyed, to be quite honest, because it's totally undermining her position. Had they done the review post the election next May, that's totally and completely legitimate. But to do it now when you've got a live candidate and basically chop them off at the knees, saying, well, we're not really happy with this, because that's the impression they're giving, I think it's utterly and totally unfair.
Greg Hands, of course, would deny that.
Yes, Greg Hands would deny that. Important to say, Greg Hands actually does have a sort of track record with this. He was the chair of Sean Bailey's campaign to be the Mayor of London last time around.
So the chair of Sean Bailey's campaign to be Mayor of London has called for an inquiry into how Susan Hall got selected to be the new candidate.
Yes, essentially. Another sort of note, James, is that the review is going to be conducted by Lord Undy Lister, formerly Eddie Lister. He's sort of well known in London circles, the former leader of Wandsworth Council, former Deputy Mayor of London, and was Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff in Downing Street as well. But many opposition parties I've spoken with on the London Assembly, James, saying that actually this shows the Conservatives have just given up on London and actually a review's probably needed. I spoke with Jenny Jones earlier, another former Deputy Mayor of London and, of course, a Green Party peer.
I feel a bit bad about commenting on the Conservative Party at the moment, kicking a person when they're down and all that. But quite honestly, this is a terrible mess and they didn't have to get into this mess. The only stroke of genius the National Tory Party ever had about the London mayoralty was when they put Boris Johnson up, and look at the mess that's got us into. So basically, the Tory Party should just stay out of London. I mean, an inquiry might have been useful, but not at this point. It should have been done perhaps after the election. This is the most terrible mess. I don't know how they're going to fix this, because they have not only undermined their candidate, they've undermined themselves.
Is there any prospect of Susan Hall being biffed?
I don't think so. I mean, speaking with sort of sources in opposition parties, James, they are keen actually for there to be the runoff between Sadiq Khan and Susan Hall, because they believe that actually that will ensure Sadiq Khan gets his third term as the Mayor of London. Just to run you through what the Conservatives are saying, James, Susan Hall's tweeted in the last hour that this review is an excellent idea. I fully support it and it will help us ensure we're at our best. Greg Hands also sort of commented on my tweet saying that the review is not specifically looking at the selection of the London mayor. I think what they've done, James, is broaden it out so it doesn't look like they're totally distancing themselves from their candidate. He said it will look after the London campaigning machine and is being done with the full support of Susan Hall.
And you've spoken to a few other people as well, including another candidate who was Samuel Kasumu on the list at some point.
Samuel Kasumu was on the list, and he's tweeted actually that sort of Susan Hall is the candidate, and that this review is too little, too late, and that really it's
just all very strange, isn't it?
It is strange, and he is particularly aggrieved because he was seen. I mean, if you look at the polls as well, the internal polls, he was seen to be doing very well. He was a former advisor to Boris Johnson. He resigned over the race review when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, the one done by Tony Sewell. And so he'd
have been a formidable candidate, I think. He's bright as a button by all accounts. He wrote The Power of the Outsider, I think, didn't he?
Yes, he's got that book out, and he's he's seemed to be a very well-known figure.
Well, Susan Hall, I think, best known for abusing Gemma Collins on Twitter.
That was a story, wasn't it? That was a tweet. But the big sort of argument about Samuel Kasumu, as far as some Conservatives were concerned, is that he's a councillor in Welwyn Hatfield, and so they said he doesn't sort of live in London.
He hasn't got the sound of the Bow bells ringing in his ears as he makes his way to work. When's it going to end? Do we know? Not everything, just this inquiry.
Yes, just a review. Yeah. I mean, I was told it will take a few months. Speaking with people close to the review, I mean, there's a lot of work by the sound of it to be done, because they want to look at the whole of the London party. There are clearly a lot of problems, although the sort of main Conservative party, not the London one, saying they've won Uxbridge and South Ruislip, so things aren't as bad as they appear.
Right, by 495 seats.
Yes.
Have you ever eaten a fake meat burger?
I had a fake meat kebab last night, actually,
Did you
bizarrely,
really?
which, and I couldn't believe it. It's incredible.
was it?
It was really nice.
Where were you?
It was opposite, it was a Sainsbury's, which is opposite my house, and it was reduced from £3 to 69p.
Can you get the managing editor online too, please? I think Henry needs a pay rise.
So I thought I'd give it a go. So I whacked it in the frying pan. It was very nice. Meat substitute.
Fake doner.
It was really good.
And then
buy
you
some.
stuck it in a pita yourself? Or?
I actually didn't have...
I'm beginning to wonder whether I should have asked you this question.
There was some criticism because I didn't put it in a pita. I just ate the meat, the fake meat.
Did you?
Yeah.
And it was, but you probably wouldn't. I mean, I'm just interested today in why fake meat sales have gone off a cliff. But you, as ever, Henry, are swimming against the tide.
I am, as usual.
It's 12:57. Thank you, Henry Riley. We look forward to the results of the Conservatives' inquiry into how the hell they ended up with Susan Hall as their candidate for mayor. One call, surely time. Lynn in Camberwell. Lynn, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Really confirming the conclusion you've got to.
Yes.
I was shopping when a product had come out, and I can't remember which of the products it was that had come out.
Yeah.
We've got one of each in our family, vegan, vegetarian, and I'm a pescatarian.
Blimey.
So,
What happened when a vegan, a vegetarian and a pescatarian walked into a pub?
What?
They couldn't find anything on the menu. I just made that up, actually, you could tell.
Do you know what? It was like that,
I know.
first of all, unfortunately,
It's
unless you
got
wanted
better.
a bowl of pasta for a fiver,
Yes, but not with parmesan on it for the vegan.
No, exactly,
Got rennet in the. Anyway, sorry, we're going to run out of time. What?
Sorry.
No, my
So,
fault. I'm the
I
one
couldn't
messing
find
around.
I couldn't find the product.
Right.
So I asked a member of staff, and she took me down an aisle where the meat was, and I think I looked before it kind of registered, really.
Yeah.
I had a face full of what I thought was raw meat with blood all over it.
Right.
Because they were selling it next to that meat product.
Oh.
So it really put me off, and I didn't buy any. So
Okay.
I wrote to the manufacturer thinking they would be horrified.
Yes.
And they wrote back to me saying that was their marketing strategy. They weren't actually aiming it at me.
Well, that's fascinating. So, do you
Didn't
think
really
that,
care.
No, that it wasn't aimed at you. It was aimed at me. Like I said all
Yeah.
along, it was aimed
Yeah.
at me, and it's failed. Whereas, in fact, if they
has.
were aiming it at you, they might have had more success.
Yeah, I must admit, it did give me a little bit of a smile today.
Right, to learn that it's all gone horribly wrong.
They were so pompous when
What?
they wrote back to me.
Oh,
that,
really?
Yeah.
Like, who do you
Yeah.
think you are questioning our brilliant decisions?
Well, not so much who do you think you are, but just trying to...
Belittle you.
Yes, yes.
They
Totally,
picked, I tell you what, they picked
totally.
the wrong woman there, Lynn, didn't they? You got it.
And thank you for taking my call. I'm
Well,
a little bit nervous
well, I-
because
well, you
you're my favourite on this station.
Oh,
so.
you're very. You should check out Sheila though. She's much better than me.
I've spoken to Sheila a couple of times.
There
I've
you
always
go.
been too nervous for you.
Oh, what was it like in the event, Lynn?
It was it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's been
that.
great.
I am the fake meat to Sheila's sirloin steak, and I'm delighted that you've managed to find it within you to enjoy both of them.
Lynn and James sitting on a tree.
That's it for today. If you missed any of the show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. So rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4, Ben Kentish in for Tom Swarbrick. And now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. M4 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 Sheila Fogarty.